6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, what's up guys? The course is dedicated to teaching people how to build, launch, and monetize their own apps. Now, just a quick overview about the course. The end goal is for you to have an app with users that pay money. This course will start completely from scratch and take you through the entire journey of publishing a production-ready app with monetization. Now, since every app is different, I designed this course to focus on the core building blocks that every app needs. So by the end of this course, you will have built a minimal social media Reddit style app. Now, the course is organized into 3 modules, starting with the build module. We're going to code the app using Flutter. We'll focus on mobile apps, and then later down the line, if your app is successful, then you can decide if you want to expand to different platforms. Now, starting with one of the most fundamental concepts in app development, which is authentication. I'll show you how to implement not only the email, but also Apple and Google sign-in, which is a must-have in a modern application. And once the user logs in, they can post a message, as well as comment, and they can navigate around using this nice tab bar widget. Then naturally, we will have a user profile and settings page to handle blocking, reporting, and all the features required to be approved on the App Store. When it comes to storing the data, we will use Firebase, and I want to mention here that the code is organized in a clean architecture type of way, such that any database of your choice should be easy to swap out here. Speaking of which, for the state management, we will use Block and Qubits, which I absolutely love. And then of course, our app has to look aesthetically good. So I'll show you how you can steal my minimal design in both light mode and dark mode. So by the end of the first module, you will have built a fully functional app. Then we can move on to the launch section. So I'll show you how to prepare your app for submission to the Apple App Store, such as preparing the icon, screenshots, preparing the builds, and also how to deal with real-world situations like app rejections and how to overcome that. Now, to be approved on the App Store, we also need things like terms of service and a privacy policy page, which brings us to our landing page, like the one you're looking at right now. So I'll show you how to build a simple landing page using basic HTML and CSS, and I'll also show you how to host it for free using GitHub. These are all super valuable skills that I've gathered over the years. And then finally, the monetization section. So I'll show you how to price it to be either free download or a one-time payment. But more importantly, I'll teach you how to generate recurring revenue with subscriptions using RevenueCat. So we can create a kind of pro version of your app that users can pay for in like a monthly or yearly subscription. So that's what this course is about. It starts completely from scratch and takes you on the entire journey to build, launch, and monetize your own apps. Now, just before we start, I made this nice overview diagram of the different pages in the app and how they are all interconnected, which I think is always helpful to visualize. So at the very beginning, we will check if the user is logged in. If they are not logged in, then we will go to the login page or register page to create a new account. And once they are authenticated, we will go to the home page where users can post and comment. Then we have a nice little menu drawer for the settings page and the user profile page. And we can also log out from here, which will take us to the very beginning. So this is what we're about to code up. I want you to open up a brand new Flutter project and let's begin with the authentication. I've opened up a brand new Flutter project and you should just get this demo counter app. We're going to create this from scratch. So let's delete everything below the main function. And in my material app, I just want to check this debug banner to be false. And let's just start with a blank scaffold. So you should have a white blank app like this. Now let's come to our Firebase console and I'm going to create a new project. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Build, Launch, Monetize App. And then let's create the project. Sweet, now that's done. Now let's start with the authentication. I want you to enable the email auth. Let's come back to our Flutter project. And the first thing I want you to do is open up Xcode, and let's open up the Flutter project. So that you can go to the runner, and I just want you to change the minimum deployment to 13 because that's what Firebase requires. And the other important thing is this bundle ID. So you can see it's got the example. Now I want you to select an appropriate bundle ID for you. So this will be important for when we publish this app to the App Store. So it's a good idea to set this at the very beginning. I'm going to say app.mitchcoco.blm for build, launch, monetize. So just select the appropriate bundle ID for you. And once that's done, let's close Xcode. And you can actually do something similar for Android in the build Gradle. So this will be useful for when we publish it to the App Store. Now let's open up our terminal. If you've never used Firebase before, then you're going to need to install the Firebase tools by typing in this command. But I've already done that, so make sure to do that. And what that will allow is for us to say Firebase login. So make sure you're logged in with your email. And then we can say Flutter pub global activate the Flutter Fire CLI. Cool, which allows us to now say Flutter Fire configure. And so you should be able to see your Firebase project. There it is. Now I'm going to choose the platforms. Let's just select iOS and Android. Cool. And once you've done that, you should be able to see in your folder structure the new file for this Firebase options. Currently, it's got a red squiggle because we need to import the Firebase core package. So in the terminal, let's say flutter pub add Firebase core. And so now there's no more red errors. And in the main function, just to do a bit of Firebase setup, let's say widgets flutter binding ensure initialized, and then we can await the Firebase and initialize the app for our current platform. Beautiful. Now at this point, I want you to kill the app and just rebuild it so that we know if we have successfully connected to Firebase. Cool, so if you come back to your Firebase project and you refresh the page, hopefully you can see that we have added the two apps to our Firebase console. Sweet. So now that our app is connected to Firebase, let's now focus on the authentication. So in the terminal, I want you to add flutter pub add Firebase auth. And while we're here, let's also add flutter block, which is the state management that we're going to use to keep our code nice and clean and organized. So if you don't know what we just did, if you go to your pubspec.yaml, you can see the packages down here that we've added. So now we can start coding this up. Now I'm going to use a clean architecture and make the code as organized and modular as possible. So in my library, let's create a new folder called features. And the first feature we're going to implement is the auth. And so in each feature, I want to have 3 layers: the data, domain, and the presentation layer. So starting with the domain layer, this is the core part of your app. And so we're going to create an entity, which some people like to call models. And basically, we're going to have an app user. Okay, so everyone that uses our app is going to have a user ID and an email. And we can create the constructor for this. And then it's common to have a couple methods down here just to convert our app user into a JSON format and vice versa. So if you don't know what a JSON format is, it's a map, like this. Which is how the data is stored in Firebase. And then when we grab information from Firebase, we can convert it back into our app user object. Cool, so we've got our app user. Now I want you to create a new folder called repos, and we're going to create an auth repo. So this auth repository, I'm just going to comment here, we're outlining the possible auth operations for this app. So these are my main auth functions that I want to implement. The login with email and password, register with email password, have a method to log out, have a method to get the current user, and some other additional things like sending the password reset email. And we also need to have a method to delete the account, which Apple requires in the App Store. So now that we've got this auth repository, if you go to the data layer, we can create a new file called Firebase auth repo. And so in this data layer, I'm choosing Firebase to be the backend to implement this, but you can swap out any backend to use here. And so this is why coding in this clean architecture way is really useful if we want to change our backend to something else. So the cool thing about this is if you say implements the auth repo, we're going to implement each of these methods. So currently you can see it's got that red squiggle. And so if you hover over it, it's saying that we're missing the implementation of the delete account, get current user, and all of those methods. So if you just start typing login, you can see it's going to autofill out the fact that we need to code up this method. So we got login, we got register, and actually if you hover over this red squiggle, you can actually see we can create the 4 missing overrides. So these are all the methods in our auth repository that we need to implement. Cool, so let's start doing the Firebase part of this. And so for the login method, we're going to just try to log in with the email and password. Cool, so let's try to sign in. And then we can grab that information to create our user. And just return it. Cool, and if we have any errors, we will just throw an exception. Sweet, and that's how we do the login. Let's do the similar thing for register. So if you go to your Firebase auth, we can create user with email and password. And once we've done that, we can create the app user in our app and just return it. And catch any errors. Sweet, so that's register done. Now let's fill out the delete account. So firstly, we're going to try to get the current user and just make sure that there is a user that is logged in. And then we can try to delete the account. Cool, and just log out if we need to as well. Sweet. And then implementing the get current user. So let's try to get the current user from Firebase and just check if there is a logged in user or not. And if there is a logged in user, then return that as an app user object. Sweet. And then we have the logout, which is pretty simple as well. Just go to your Firebase auth and we can just sign out. And this one is also important. We need to send a password reset if they forgot the password. Sweet, done. So we've coded up all the Firebase auth backend stuff. So now that we've done that, let's close everything. We've done the data layer, domain layer, and now it's time for the presentation layer. So I want you to create a couple of folders here. So we've got the qubits, and we're going to create an auth qubit and an auth state. So starting with the auth state, what this is we're going to outline the different type of states we can have when a user is trying to authenticate. So for example, we can have an initial state. We can have an auth loading state. And then we can have an authenticated state, which, by the way, if they are authenticated, then that means we're going to have some sort of user that's logged in, right? And we can have another state for when they are unauthenticated, and also just an error state. And we can hold what the message is for the error. Sweet, so these are the different states that we can have. And so if you come to our auth qubit, this qubit is responsible for state management, which essentially is just trying to show the appropriate data on the screen. So let's try this. We can say auth qubit extends the qubit, and you can see the Flutter block package, which we can hit enter to auto import. And for the type, we can say auth state. Cool, so whenever we call this auth qubit, we're going to need an auth repository to access. And let's also store the current user locally. And we'll create the constructors for this. And let's create a getter method to get the current user. And let's start filling out some of these methods. So I want to have a method to check if the user is authenticated. And so when I call this method, we can start loading, and you can see I'm going to emit this auth loading state. So we're telling the code and the app right now that we are loading. And so while that's loading, let's get the current user from our auth repo. And let's just do a quick check. If there is a user, then let's give it to our current user, and then we can emit the authenticated state and pass the user through. Right? Otherwise, we are unauthenticated. Sweet. So that's how we can check if a user is authenticated. Now let's fill out our login method. So again, we're just going to emit the loading state first, and let's go to our auth repo and try to log in. Cool, and if we have an error, just emit the auth error. And once we know what the error is, ultimately we're going to be unauthenticated in this case. Sweet, looking good. Now let's do the register. And register is going to be very similar to the login. So I'm just going to copy the main part of this method. But if you go to your auth repo, just change up the method to be register, and we can pass through the name as well. Sweet, and let's have our logout method. and then forgot password. And very last thing is a deleting account method. Sweet, so that's how we fill out the auth qubit. And again, this qubit is responsible for the state management, right? So you can see the auth repo that it calls, like it's calling these methods. And the actual logic for these methods are in the Firebase repository, right? So it's going to call all those methods, and in the qubit, it's just responsible for emitting the different states so that we can keep track of what's going on. Sweet. So now that we've done the qubits, finally we are up to the pages, which is the UI. So let's create our login page. And on this page, a user can log in with their email and password. And once the user successfully logs in, they will be directed to the home page. If the user doesn't have an account, then we can send them to the register page to create an account. Cool, so let's create a stateful widget for our login page. And in the scaffold, let's just give it an app bar. And so in our main.dart, you can see currently I'm just returning a blank scaffold. So now let's return the login page. Sweet, there it is. And so now we can just start decorating this UI. And just before we start building out the UI, it's probably a good idea to set up the themes. So I'm going to create a light mode and a dark mode. And so you can copy these colors that I've chosen if you like. So I'm going to go for a minimal sort of set of colors. The common ones to specify are the primary, the secondary, tertiary, and inverse primary, as well as the scaffold background color. So you can choose whatever colors you want, but you can see that I've just chosen different shades of light gray. And so once you've got this theme, if you come back to the main.dart file, you can specify the theme to be light mode. And there it is, you can see the colors are changing. So just to show you, for example, the scaffold background color, if I change it to red, you can see that it changes up. So any of the colors you can change in this light mode file. I also like to have a dark mode, so let's fill that out while we're here. So same thing, but for darker colors. In our main.dart file, currently we're giving the theme to be light mode, and there's actually a dark theme which we can give the dark mode to. And if you come to your settings, if you just search dark mode, you can change the theme, right? So depending on your phone's system theme, like your iPhone's dark mode or light mode, it will just change up automatically. Cool, sweet. So as we go along, we can fine tune these colors, but I think for now it's looking pretty good. So in our login page, let's start building out the UI. And I'm just going to put a bunch of comments just to make it as clear as possible. So we got the scaffold, the app bar, and the body. And in the body, we're going to have a big column for the logo. Let's have the name of the app, the email and password text field, forgot password, login button, and some extra stuff down the bottom. So this is the plan. Let's start filling this out. So for the logo, obviously you can bring your own image in, but we can sort that out later. For now, I'm just going to put in some kind of icon. And you can see we can obviously give it a color. But instead of giving a fixed color, I'm going to go to my theme and give it my primary color. So that's how we can access all of those colors we specified earlier. We have the name of the app. I'm just going to call it Build Launch Monetize. Sweet, and let's keep going down, and now we're up to the text field. So if you just save this, you can see that we can type something into this text field. Now we're probably going to require a lot of these text fields in the future. As you can see, we need email text field and password text field. So it's a good idea to create this as a separate component just to make our code nice and organized, and we can reuse this. So if you come back to the login page, you can start typing my text field, and you can see there it is. And now we can just start decorating it in this my text field file. So what we need is we need a controller to access what the user typed. Let's have a hint text and an obscure text, which I'll explain a little bit later on as we go. But let's require these in the constructor. And we can pass the controller through and then pass the obscure text through. And we can try to decorate this. So I like to have some borders when it's unselected as well as selected. And so they're just going to have slightly different colors, that's all. And just to see what this looks like, let's come back to the login page. You can see it's got a red squiggle, so I'm going to just fill out all of these things. And the first thing is I need to actually have a text controller at the top. So let's create these, one for email and one for password. And so if you pass the email controller to the text field, it'll help us access what's in the text field that the user typed. We got the hint text, and the obscure text, I'm going to say false. And so you can see there is our text field with the border. And let's actually pass through the hint text as well, which is just kind of the default what is in there to let the user know what they should type. Sweet, looking pretty good. And we can also add a fill color. And it's looking pretty good. It's all stuck to the side though. So let's add an overall padding. And it's looking good. So now let's create the same text field for the password. And for the obscure text, you can see if I say true, it's just for hiding the text, right? Which is what we want for the password. Sweet. Cool. Now I think the border radius is a bit sharp, so you can curve it a bit. And let's get rid of this app bar now. And let's continue. So we're going to have a forgot password. Which I want to put on the sort of end. And one way to do that is just put it in a row, which will then align it to the beginning. And I'm just going to push the access alignment to the end. Sweet. And now time for the login button. And same thing as we did for the text field, I'm going to create this in a new component so that we can reuse the button. Cool, so there's our button. And we can start decorating it in this file. So we got the color of the button. Let's add some padding. And curve the corners. and just overall just decorate this up. And the main thing is we want to wrap this in a gesture detector so that we can actually tap on this button, right? So if you hover over the on tap, you can see what it requires. So I'm just going to copy that, and you can see at the top I'm going to require that, the on tap function. And let's also require some text. Sweet, so coming back to the login page, we can fill out the My button. On tap, let's currently just execute nothing. And text, I'm going to say login. Sweet, that's looking pretty good. Cool, now the OAuth signing, like Google and Apple, we're going to do that just a little bit later. Let's just finish off the very bottom. I want to have a section to say, don't have an account. Then register now. Sweet, that's looking pretty good. Now let's check out the dark mode. And I feel like we could switch up the dark mode colors. The tertiary, as well as secondary, I feel like we could change up the color. And I think that looks much better. Now I'm going to create a register page. So let's create a stateful widget. And it's going to be very similar to the login page. So I'm just going to copy this main body part and paste it in the register page and import everything that's needed. And in the main function, let's just return the register page so that we can see what we're changing. And mainly we just need another password for confirming the password. Which means we're going to need to create these controllers. And we're not going to need the forgot password. Also, let's just say, let's create an account for you. And it'll be a register button. Or we can say sign up. Cool, and then at the bottom we can say already have an account, then let's log in now. Nice. Also, if you like, you can add any additional text fields that you want. So let's say I want to add a username, then you can add that as well. So completely up to you what you want to include, but I'm going to do these 4 things. And our login page and register page is looking pretty good. Now in our main function, we're returning either a login page or a register page. So I need to know which one I'm going to display. So to handle that, I'm going to create a new file called auth page. And this page determines whether to show the login or register page. So initially, let's show the login page. And let's have a method to toggle between the pages. Sweet, and then when we build this, we can display the appropriate page. Cool, now to trigger this method, if you look in our login page, I'm going to need to accept a method at the top called toggle pages. And so if you come down here, the register now text, I want to wrap this in a gesture detector so that we can tap on it. Right, same thing with the register page. I'm going to wrap it in a gesture detector so that I can tap it, and then at the top we can pass through the toggle pages function. Cool, which means if you come to our auth page, it's got the red squiggles because we need to pass through that method. So this is where we can pass that in. And finally, in our main.dart, instead of displaying a login or a register, we can just show the auth page to handle that. So now you can click on these buttons at the bottom. So register, you can go to the register page and back to the login page. Really good. So now that we've set up the presentation layer, now let's actually put all this together and make our authentication actually work. So in my app, I want you to create the auth repo. So we created our Firebase auth repo at the beginning. And in our material app, I want you to grab that and we're going to wrap it in a multi-block provider. So again, this is the block state management that we're using. And so what this does is we are providing the qubits to the app. Right, the first qubit that we've created is the auth qubit. And at the end of this, you can actually also call the check auth method so that we can check if the user's logged in or not at the very beginning. Now it looks like we have some error in the test. Oh, let's get rid of this const tag. It's not that important. And finally, so you see this in the auth qubit, the check auth will be called at the very beginning. And this will call the auth repository to see if we are authenticated. Awesome. So in the material app, in our home, what I want to do is I want to return a block consumer. So a block consumer has a builder and a listener. So I'll show you what is happening. So let me just write these comments to be clear. So the first thing in the builder is we can check the state. And if our state is unauthenticated, then we're going to return the auth page. Now, if the state is authenticated, then let's return the home page, which we haven't created yet. So let's actually do that now. So you can see in the features, we have our auth feature. Now let's create another feature called home. And let's just quickly create the presentation folder, pages folder to finally create the home page. So I'm just going to create a very basic scaffold with an app bar. And let's come back to the main to import it. Cool. And then at the very end, let's say else it's just loading. So I'll just show a loading circle. Sweet. So that's the builder. Now the listener is also helpful because it will listen for specific state changes and we can actually run a method. So for example, if the state is an error, then I'm going to show a message. Sweet. And so just to be clear for you guys, you can see the state, right? If you just print the state, you should be able to see in the debug console what state we're in currently. So obviously at the beginning, we're going to be loading and it looks like we're unauthenticated. So we are not logged in, which is why we're seeing this auth page. And that's what we did in our auth qubit. As you can see, all of those emitting the states. So hopefully you're following on. So now that everything is set up, we need to just fill out for the user their details and then they're going to click this sign up button. So it looks like currently we're executing nothing. So what I'm going to do is, let's say register button pressed. And so at the beginning, let's just prepare all the info. Let's grab our auth qubit. And just a couple checks. First thing is I just want to ensure that the fields aren't empty. And if it passes that first case, then let's also make sure that the passwords match, right? And then we can register in our auth qubit. If the passwords don't match, then let's just show a snack bar. Cool, and if it doesn't pass the first condition, where some of the fields are empty, then let's also display a snack bar to display that error. Cool, and it's a good practice to dispose of all of our controllers to control for memory leaks. And that's it. So in our register button, we can now pass our register method. And you can see if I click sign up, you can see the snack bar showing the error at the bottom. Right, so let's actually make everything work, and I'm gonna sign up. Sweet, and you can see we're signing in, and then we are directed to the home page. And you saw for a brief second the loading circle as well. And everything is looking so good. Now the natural next thing to do is to have a button to log out. So in our home page, if you look at the actions in the app bar, I want you to create an icon button to log out. There it is. Now if I click on this, I want to just go to my auth qubit and just log out. And boom, it just logs out automatically. So let's just test this out again. I'm going to create a new user. And you can see this is why Block is so helpful with the state management, because we can see exactly what's happening inside the app, like whether we're authenticated or not, for example. Sweet, that's looking really good. So now that we can create a user, let's come to our login page and do something similar for logging in when the button's pressed. We're just going to prepare the info. Ensure that the fields are filled and all the good stuff. Sweet, we did the method. Now let's pass it to our button. And let's test this out. So I'm going to try to log in, and it looks like we have some sort of error saying the snack bar was called, but we don't have a scaffold. And I think I know what happened. If you come to our main.dat file in here, for the loading, yeah, we're just returning the widget of the circular progress indicator, but we should put that in a scaffold as well so that we can use the snack bar and stuff like that. So come to your components and create a loading.dart file and just put it inside of a scaffold. So now you can come back here and just say loading screen. So that should work now. Let's try again. Sweet, so the loading is working good. Beautiful. Cool, now the natural next thing to do is to fill out the forgot password when they press on that. So let's open a box to ask the user. And we'll just ask for their email. And let's create a couple buttons. So cancel button. And then the reset password button. If you reset the password, then we're just going to go to our auth qubit, call the method. And it looks like we don't have an auth qubit. I thought we created one earlier. Oh, we did, but it's in the login method. So just pull that out. There we go. Cool, so if the message is password email sent, check your inbox, then everything's all good. So let's just pop the box and clear the controller. Let's test this out. So you can see in our auth qubit, we're calling this method. In our auth repository, which if we go to that Firebase auth repository, yep, this is what is actually happening. So looks like that's the message that we chose. So just make sure that it's the same message that we're checking. Password, reset, email. It has to look exactly the same as this. Cool, so now if you scroll down to the forgot password, go to the text widget and wrap it in a gesture detector. And pass that method in. Cool, so if I click forgot password, you can see this little pop-up box. We can enter an email, and then if you set reset, then you can see password, reset, email sent, and check your inbox. And so, yep, you should be able to get an email from Firebase to reset the password. Beautiful. Now, if you come back to Firebase, we have done the email authentication. Let's now do the OAuth sign in. So the Google and the Apple. By the way, if you want to upload your app to the iOS App Store, it's a requirement that if you're going to use Google sign in, that you have to include Apple sign in. So let's start with the Apple. I want you to go to your Apple developer and create a new ID. So the bundle ID, so remember this is how we're going to identify your app that we specified at the very start. So for me, it was app.mitchcoco.blm, and you can put in any random description. And the capabilities, I want you to scroll down and just select the sign in with Apple, and then we can click continue and register. Once you've done that, I want you to open Xcode. Go to sign in capabilities and add in a new capability, which is the sign in with Apple. Cool. Now, if we come back to our auth repository, we had all of these methods from before. Let's add in a couple more for signing in with Google and signing in with Apple. Which means in our Firebase auth repository, you can see it's got the red squiggles because we have to implement these methods. So let's do that at the bottom. Starting with Apple, you can copy this code for the most part. So we're going to start by requesting the Apple ID credentials. And actually we need to import the packages. So open up your terminal, flutter pub add, sign in with Apple. And let's also do Google sign in. So those are the two packages we need. So once you've got that, we should be able to say await sign in with Apple. There it is. And get the Apple ID credentials. In the scopes, let's grab the email and the full name. Then we can create our OAuth credential. And just pass through the tokens. And then we can sign in with these credentials. And if that's successful, then we should be able to return this Firebase user. And if everything is all good, then we should be able to create our app user in our code. And just display any errors. Sweet, and that's pretty much the code that you need for signing in with Apple. Let's do something similar for Google. So we're going to begin with the interactive sign-in process. So go to your Google sign-in package and try to sign in. Similar things here. If the user canceled the sign-in, let's just return. And try to obtain the auth details from the request. Then we can create our credential and then sign in with these credentials. So to be honest, you don't need to spend too much time trying to understand this bit of code because it's just, you can just copy what I've written. Beautiful. So we've done the code for signing in with Apple and Google. So we've done the data layer, we've done the domain layer. Now it's time for the presentation layer. So go to your auth qubit and we need to now fill out these couple of methods for the state management. So for this qubit, it's very similar to when we log in, right? So I'm just going to copy that method. And all we need to change is just when we're calling the auth repo, just call the appropriate method. So sign in with Apple and everything else should be the same. And for the Google as well, just go to the auth repo and say sign in with Google. And all of the other state management stuff should be the same. Beautiful. Now it's just time for the presentation UI, so the pages. And I'm going to bring in a couple of icons. So the Apple icon and the Google icon. You can download these off the internet, but I've also got them in my code that you can download as well. So I have these two PNG files and I'm going to go to my library and create a new folder called assets. And let's drag these two images in. Cool, once you've done that, come back to the code and in the pubspec.yaml, we have to let it know that we're bringing in these assets. So you can comment the asset part out and specify where the folder is. So we put it in library/assets. And so you can see there's our little images. And in our components, let's just create these two buttons, starting with the Apple sign-in. And essentially, we're just going to try to display that image. So let's come to our login page at the very bottom. Let's put it in a row and see what this button looks like. My Apple sign-in button, there it is. And if I save it, you can see there it is, and it's so big. So let's control the height. And that's looking pretty good. So now we can just decorate it up. I'm going to put some decoration for the borders and stuff like that. Let's make the border curved. And so you can style it how you want, but I'm going to go for like a nice minimal style. And I think that looks pretty good so far. So that's looking pretty good. Now finally, I want to wrap this in a gesture detector so that we can tap on it. Right, so let's require that at the top. And so coming back to our login page, it's got the red squiggle because we need to fill out the on tap. Sweet. So that's looking pretty good. Now let's make our Google sign in button. So again, it's super similar. I'm just gonna copy most of this. But change it to Google. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Cool, there it is, but it looks like the color is dark. So I'm actually gonna get rid of the color for the Google one. Nice. And the reason why the Apple button, I'm gonna give it a color, the inverse primary, is because if we change the theme, I want the Apple icon to look white. And the Google one is colored, so I think that's fine. So that looks really good. So I'm just gonna space this to the middle and just space it out. Cool. To make this look even nicer at the top, I'm just gonna include a kind of divider. So you can see that's what a divider is. It's just the line. But I want to put two dividers side by side, and in the middle, let's put a text widget to say or sign in with. Okay, and I'm just going to change the axis alignment to the end and try to just make this a little fine-tuned to look a little better. One useful thing you can do is wrap everything in a safe area widget. It just helps avoid the parts of the screen, like the notch area and stuff like that. So that's kind of helpful. Now I think everything's good. So since we brought in a couple of new packages, it's always a good idea to just kill the app and rebuild it. And I'm trying to rebuild it, but it looks like we have a little error. It says CocoaPod spec repository is out of date. We need to do the pod repo update. So this error you see quite often when you're developing for iOS with Flutter. And it's a really simple fix, essentially just to explain what's going on. We included these new packages, right? Like the Apple sign-in and the Google sign-in. And so every time we add these new packages for iOS, it needs to update its pod file to use those packages. So I want you to go to the terminal and I want you to follow these commands that I type in to ensure that it's updated correctly. So the first thing is I want you to change the directory to the iOS folder and I want you to remove the pod file. So just say rm-rf podfile.lock and just type this command exactly. We're going to pod deintegrate. So we're basically deleting the pod. And then let's say pod install repo update. So this will just cleanly update your pod file. Then I want you to say flutter clean, flutter pub get, and then everything should be good. So I'm going to try to run the debug now, and it should be all good. Awesome. Now while that's building in our Apple button, you can see on the on tap, we are actually executing nothing. So when we call this, we're just going to go to our auth qubit and then sign in with Apple, right? Same thing with the Google. Just go to your auth qubit and sign in with Google. So yay, our app has successfully built. Now, if I click on the Apple, you can see it says sign in with your Apple IDs. So that's working perfectly fine. So we're on the simulator, but if you test this on your actual device, it'll make you sign in. That's what we want to see. And let's try the Google. And it looks like it crashed. And that's because we did all the code, but we actually didn't do the Firebase part. So let's come back to Firebase. And in our sign-in method, so we got the email, Apple. Now let's add a new provider for Google. So you can change the name of this project and select your email. And just click done. Sweet. Now if you go to your project settings at the top, go to your iOS, and I want you to download the Google Service Info.plist. Okay, I'm gonna pop that on my desktop. And if you open it, we need some of these values, so keep that handy. Now, everything that I'm doing, I'm following the documentation for this package, right? So we're using the Google sign-in package. So you can follow what I do, but just remember that the most up-to-date information is on this package and it's got all the appropriate instructions. So I would highly recommend you to actually read it yourself. But this Google sign-in package, if I was to show you how to do it for iOS, you can see the iOS integration there. So I'm going to follow these steps. So we've created a Firebase project and registered our application. We've done number 2, enabling the Google sign-in. We've also downloaded the Google Service Info.plist. And then what we need to do is these steps now. So we need to add the client ID in iOS runner info.plist. So let's copy this and go to iOS runner info.plist. And at the top, just paste it in. And you can see it literally says what we need to do. So we need to replace this client ID value. And let's paste it in. Let's come back to the instructions. Number 5, we can actually skip because we don't need to do the backend server. We've got Firebase. We just need to do number 6. So copy that. And same thing under this, just paste it in. And what we need to do is the reverse client ID. So let's grab that and paste it in. So that's all the setting up for iPhone. So let's try this again. I'm going to close this and rebuild it. So Apple works, and then Google, yay, now Google works as well. It wants us to sign in and it shows us this dialog box. Hey, everything's working perfectly. Cool, so now if we log in and we're in this home page, let's start to progress forward. And I want to create a menu drawer. So if you just put a blank drawer, you can see that menu icon on the top left, and it will open a blank drawer. So this one, again, I'm going to put in a new component, and this one is very general. So I'm going to create a component folder outside. So in our drawer, let's have a big column. We're going to have a home tile and a logout tile. So just to see what's going on, let's come back to the home page and use my drawer. And at the top here, we can use a drawer header. And in here, you can put in any kind of widget like an icon. And for these tiles, I'm going to put this in a new component called drawer tile so that we can reuse it. And so this drawer tile, let's require a text, an icon, as well as an on-tap function. Cool, so now let's come back to our drawer and try to import our drawer tile. There it is, and let's just fill it out with the home. It's looking good. I feel like we could now add some padding just to space this out. And now we can easily just create another drawer tile for the logout. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group the top section in another column so that I can space between, and this will push the logout tile to the bottom. Okay, another cool thing is we can use a safe area like I showed you before, just to help us avoid the edges of the screen. Now when it comes to the home tile, if I tap on this, we just want to pop the navigation. And for the login or the logout button, we actually did this over here in the home page directly, right? So let's grab that. And I'm going to just put it in the drawer here to log out. Awesome. So now if I sign in, and I'm going to put that in a separate method. And also let's just have a confirm logout box. With two buttons, a cancel button and a yes button. Awesome, so now that we can give this to our logout tile, let's test this out. It'll show us this box and then we can log out. Cool, so now we can easily add another drawer tile for the settings. And for this one, let's navigate to the settings page, which we haven't created, so I'm going to create a new feature here called the settings. And under the presentation, let's create our settings page. So I'm just going to put in a scaffold with an app bar and let's import it. And you can see we can go to our settings page now. Sweet. And similar to this page, I'm going to create another component called settings tile. And for this, I'm just going to require a title as well as an action. So just to add some comments here, this is a simple tile for each item in the settings page. And we're just going to require these two things to use this widget. So let's build this up using a container and rows. And in our settings page, let's create a big column. And at the top, my first setting is going to be to delete the account. And like I mentioned before, we need this to get our app approved in the App Store. Sweet, there it is. Now I'm going to come back to my settings tile and we can just decorate this now. Cool, so we've got the color, curved corners. Let's have some padding on the inside as well as outside. And I'm just going to style these things up. It's looking good so far. So now in our settings page, if we click on this delete tile, then let's confirm with the user firstly to if they want to delete this. right? And that's going to be very similar to when we confirmed the logout. So I'm going to just copy that dialog box. And just switch it up to the delete. And then when the user wants to actually delete it, let's handle the account deletion. So let's just show a loading circle. And then go to our auth qubit to delete the account. And once that's done, then we can pop the loading circle, as well as pop the settings page so that we can go back. And if we have any errors, let's just display the error. Cool, so if I show you what's going to happen is if I now pass this confirm account deletion to my tile here, let's try to sign in and try to delete the account. So it'll show us this confirm box to delete, and then if I say yes, it'll pop everything and then bring us back to the auth page. Looking really good. And now let's keep moving forward. In our drawer, let's have another one for the profile page. Right, and then we can go to our profile page, which let's create a new feature called profile. And then come back to our drawer and we can import it. And so now we can click on this tile to go to the profile. Right, so on here, let's start by just displaying the user's email. So we can go to our auth qubit, get our current user. And in the body, let's just have some nice widgets here. Just to display the current user's email. Nice. But now everything in terms of the authentication and the profile and the settings is set up. We can now focus on the actual functionality of this app. So in the home page, now one common thing that you can use is a tab controller, which I really like using. So if I was to show you here, let's say the length is 3. At this top of the state, we have to say with single ticker provider state mixin, just to enable this tab controller. And so when I build the UI, we got the scaffold, we got the app bar, and we got the drawer. Now inside the app bar in the bottom, we can now give it the tab bar, and we can give it the controller and the tabs. So inside the tabs, we can have a few of them. I'm going to create 3, one of them being build. So build, launch, and monetize. And so you can have these nice tabs like this. And I'm going to control the divider color, and you can specify the label color and decorate this up. Sweet. Now, while we're here on the app bar, let's create a new post button at the top right. Right, so if I click on this button, then I want to add in a new post. So in our home, let's create our domain layer and then our data layer. And so starting with the domain layer, we have to fill out the entities and the repositories. So when it comes to the entity, the main core thing that we're going to work with is a post, right? So a post, we're going to have an ID just to identify it. And each post is going to have a title a content, a category, and a username. And similarly, as we did at the beginning for the app user, let's convert these to JSON and back from JSON to our post object as well, so that we can store this in Firebase. Awesome, so that's our post. Now let's come to our repository and create our post repo. So this one, we're just going to specify the functionality. We want to be able to create a post. We want to be able to delete a post. And we want to load all the posts. Awesome. Now we're going to implement this with our data layer, and we're going to use our Firebase backend. Firebase post repo implements the post repo. You can see the red squiggles there because we need to implement these 3 methods that we had before. Right, so let's create these 3 things. Now, firstly, I'm going to get the Firebase Cloud Firestore. So we did the Firebase auth, which is all about authentication. Now we need to do the database stuff so that we can actually save information. So open up your terminal and add in this new package, flutter pub add cloud firestore. Come back to your Firebase console, and in the build here, let's go to the Firestore database, and we're going to create our database here. So choose your location. I'm just going to leave it as United States. And let's start in production mode. Cool, and then if you come over here to the rules, we can specify the rules for who can read and write in our database. So just for simplicity, I'm going to say allow read, write, and just say true. And this will just allow any of the users to be able to save their information in the database. Awesome, so now if I come back to my code, we can grab our Firebase Firestore instance. And when we are creating a new post, what we're going to do is in our Firestore, let's put it under the collection called posts. In the document, let's give it our post ID, and let's set the information. So post to JSON. Now, when it comes to deleting, it's very similar, but all we need is just the ID. So Firestore, go to our collection of posts, go to that document, and then just delete. And finally, loading all the posts. We can try to grab the snapshot in our Firestore collection of posts. And what we're going to do is we're going to map all the documents. So all the Firebase stuff is in JSON. So let's convert it from JSON to our post and give it into a nice list. Great. So that's all the domain and data layer. So now we can come to our presentation layer and deal with the qubits. So I'm going to create my post states as well as the post qubit. So starting with the states, we can have the initial state, a loading state, a loaded state, which means we're going to have some posts that are loaded. We're going to have an error state, which will have some kind of message. This one will be useful too, just post created successfully and post deleted successfully so that we know that it's all good. Cool, let's come to our post qubit. And remember, this qubit stuff is all dealing with state management, right? So in our qubit, we're giving it our post state. And let's require the repository. And this qubit handles the state management for posts. Cool, now I'm going to create a list here just for the locally cached posts. Let's have a getter method to get all the posts that we have. And these are the three methods that we're going to create. So starting with the loading, we're going to emit the state of loading. And let's try to get the posts from our repository, right? And so if that's all done successfully, then we can say post loaded and emit that state. Otherwise, we are going to emit the error state. Beautiful. Now, when we're creating a new post, I'm going to need to require some parameters, right? So I need to know the title, the content, the category, and the username to create the post. So let's start by emitting the loading state, and then let's create our post object. And when it comes to the ID, I'm just going to use the date time now, milliseconds since epoch. This will create a unique ID every time. And once we've created the post, let's go to our repository and try to create it. And if that's done, then we can emit the post created state. And at the end, let's just load all the posts so that we have the most current information. Awesome. Now let's do something similar for deleting the post. So we just need to know the ID for this one. So let's emit the post loading state and then go to our repository, try to delete it. And then once it's deleted, let's load all the posts again. Cool, so those are what we need to do for the qubits. Now if I come back to my main.dart file, remember we have to provide these qubits. So we did one for the auth repository. Let's do the same thing for the post repository. And then in our multi-block provider, we can give it the post qubit. Beautiful. So now that all of that backend stuff is set up, just coming back to our home page, the presentation UI, and we click on this button, I want to add a new post, right? So let's add a new post, and depending on the category of if it's build, launch, monetize, let's use a switch statement to see which category we're currently looking at. And then to access what the user typed, we're going to need some controllers, some text controllers for the title and the content. And let's just show a nice dialog box saying new post and provide a text field for the user to type stuff in. Cool. So this add post method, let's give it to our button down here. And so if I click on this now, yes, this new dialog box pops up. Now it's quite large. What you can do is the column for the main access size, you can just set it to minimum. And so that will just be as small as possible. It's looking good. Now, once you type your title, I want to have another one for the content, kind of like a Reddit post. And let's have our actions here. So we've got two buttons, the cancel button and the post button. So when you post the button, let's just make sure that the title controller is not empty. Okay, so if we have some stuff in there, then we can go to our post qubit and try to create the post. Cool. Now, when we are creating the post, we actually want to give the username as well. So let's actually go to our auth qubit 2. So that we can see who the current user email is. It's looking good. Popping the box, let's actually put it inside the if statement so that it only pops it when we finish creating the post. Cool. And since we brought in a new package, the Cloud Firestore, I want you to kill the app and just rebuild it so that it works properly. And let's try this. I'm going to create a new post. Let's call it first post. and just say hello and post it. Now let's come back to our Firebase and refresh the page. And there it is. You got the collection of posts. You got the post ID, so some kind of number, and then that's where we have all the information regarding the post. So since it's actually working, now all we need to do is we need to read the information from Firebase and display it in this homepage, right? So in our body, we can go to our block builder. And we have these different states. So we've got the loaded state. So if it's loaded, then we can return our tab bar view, right? Which is probably a good idea to just separate this widget out. So I'm going to try to build a list of posts for a given category. So in the parameters, we have the category, and then the other parameter is a list of all the posts. So the first thing I need to do is I need to filter the posts for just this category. Right? If the posts are empty, then let's just say like no posts are here yet. And then we're going to finally return the list of posts, but just for this category. Right, so let's get the individual post and return the post tile. Sweet, so in our block builder again, if the post is loaded, we can now build the post for this category. So the first one is for build, second one launch, third one monetize. So looking good. So that's our loaded state. If it's loading, then just return a circular progress indicator and just display the error if there is any. And we can have a fallback value as well. Sweet, so if I just save this, you can actually see that there's our first post. And if I create a second post, yes, we are now saving and also reading the data. And just to show you guys this state, at the top here, if you print the state and you open up your debug console, you can actually see everything that's going on in terms of like the state management. And this is what we mean by state management. These different states like authenticated, the post initial, post created, these are very helpful to see what is actually happening currently in our app. Cool. Now, one thing I realized is it's stuck on post initial, and I know why, because we need to trigger this load post method, right? We're meant to see this post loading, and then we can actually load the posts. But I think we're not calling that in our homepage. So at the top of the homepage, I want you to get that post qubit. And in the init state, so the initial state, we want to load the post at the very beginning. Cool, so if I just start this app again, you can see now it's auth loading, then we're authenticated, now the posts are loading, and then now the posts are loaded. So that's why you can see on our homepage that we can see the posts now. So this kind of state management using qubits and blocks is really powerful and really helpful and really clear for us to see what's happening in the app. So I hope that makes sense. You can let me know if you have any troubles. But now we can make this even prettier, and now we can just decorate this. So I'm going to create a new component called post tile. Right, so what we're going to require is just a post. And let's start decorating this up. So again, this part is just, you can decorate it up and make it look the way you want, or you can just copy me and my style. But just to show you what's happening, if I give it a blue color and I just come back to my home page and import the post tile, okay, you can see that's what it looks like. And so now we can come back to our post tile and just start decorating in this file. So I'm going to start by adding some padding on the outside. Let's add some padding on the inside too. And in the decoration for the color, I'm going to use secondary and do the usual stuff like curving the corners and all that. Cool. Now when it comes to the actual text, let's have a column because I want to have two things, right? I want to have the title and then the content. And maybe we can have a username as well. So I'm just going to space this out and decorate it to my liking. And that's looking pretty good so far. But now that we can create these posts, we need a delete button. So I'm going to put that username in a row. And let's have a delete button here. There it is. Now let's put the space between to push it on the edge. And that's looking pretty good. Now on tab, you can see it requires this sort of function. So I'm going to require that at the top. Now coming back to our home page, you can see it's got that red squiggle because we have to specify the on delete. So if we're trying to delete the post, then let's create a method here just to show the dialog to confirm again if we want to delete this. Right, so we got our actions with the two buttons. We got the text button for the cancel and then the delete button. And when I delete, just go to your post cupid and delete the post. Sweet, and let's pass this method to our post tile. And this is looking pretty good. So now let's try this. If I refresh this and I click on the cancel button, you can see it's got that dialog saying, do you want to delete it? And delete it, and then it goes away. That is awesome. We can delete and create posts. Next thing is I want to be able to tap on this post to go to the individual post page, and then we can see the comments of that post and things like that. So I'm going to add a gesture detector on this post tile and require the on tap. So let's come back here to the post tile and specify this on tap. Now if I tap on this, then I want to navigate to my post page. So let's create that now. And so we're just going to require, obviously, just the post. And in the body, let's display the post. Awesome. Now coming back to our home page, you can see we can import our post page now and pass through the post. Beautiful. So if you save this, you can click on that post tile and then it will send us to this new post page. Beautiful. Now we're going to focus on adding comments so that we can have a nice little discussion community here. So I'm going to create a new entity called comment. And so this one will have its individual ID, but also the post ID that it's associated with, the text and the username. Cool, so let's have a method to convert the comment to JSON and JSON back to the comment so that we can save it in Firebase. Sweet, now in our repositories, let's add in the comment functionality. So what we have here is the post functionality, and we're going to have the comment functionality now. So we want to add comment, delete comment, and get comments. Sweet, which means you can automatically see our Firebase repository has red squiggles because we got to implement those new methods. Starting with add comment, we're going to go to our collection of posts, and under that post, we're going to create another collection of comments, and that's where we're going to store it. So that means when I delete it, let's just copy this. It's going to be very similar, but at the end, just delete. And then if we need to load and get all the comments, this will also be very similar to the posts. We're going to get the snapshot. And for each comment, we're going to convert it from a JSON to a comment object and convert it to a nice list. And we can return that. Sweet, so that's all the backend stuff done. Now we can go to our presentation layer and work with our qubits now. If I come to my post states, I'm actually going to update the loaded one. So remember here, if I load up the posts, then we got the post, but I also want to load out the comment count so that I can display that on my post tile. So if you have a look at my post qubit, you can see that when I load the posts, I'm loading, and then I go to my repository to load all the posts, and then we can emit the post loaded. But just before we do that, let's create a map of comment counts per post. Right, so what I mean is we're going to go through each post and fetch how many comments that they have. Okay, and then once we got that information, we can pass it through to our posts loaded. Sweet, so that's just for the count. Now the three main methods down here, we have the loading comments for a post. So when I get comments, I just need to know the post ID. And we're going to just try to get it from our post repository. Similar thing for adding a comment. Let's require the appropriate fields, post ID, text, and username. And then here we can create the comment object. And add the comment via the repo. Then we can reload all the posts to update the comments. Sweet, and last thing is just deleting the comments, right? So all we need to know for this is the comment ID. Yeah, so when it comes to deleting a comment, very similar to deleting a post, we don't need the full post or comment, we just need to know the ID that's associated with it, right? So same thing for the deleting the comment. Instead of requiring the entire comment, I'm just going to require the post ID that it's associated with and the comment ID so that I can delete it. Right, so let's update our Firebase post repository to just require those two things. Sweet, and then coming back to our qubit, that means we just need to know the comment ID and the post ID to delete. Beautiful, so we got our three methods in the qubit. And everything is looking good. So now finally the presentation and the UI. So what I want to do firstly is I want to just show the comment count. So in our post tile, I want to include a integer for the comment count. And let's initialize it to be 0 at the beginning. Right, so where should we put it? So we got the header row here, we got the title. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking maybe this username we could put at the very bottom. And actually just put the title at the top. And maybe we could space it out more. And then this username, let's put in a row. So we'll have username and then the comment count next to it. Sweet. So if I save it, you can see there's a 0. So let's space between to push that 0 over here. And then we can say like 0 comments. Now I'm actually going to remove this container widget. And also this gesture detector, I'm going to change to an inkwell. And it's very similar, gesture detector and inkwell. But an inkwell, you can actually just tap on the entire thing, even the dead space. So let's do that. And I'm just gonna make this look nicer with the padding and spacing. Let's add a second post to see what this looks like. And it's looking pretty good. Now I think in the home page, if you go to the build category posts, we can actually change this to separated. And this is a very convenient way to add a divider line. So we can give it a color and maybe add some horizontal padding. And that's looking pretty good. Now, again, I feel like we could make the colors a little bit better. Like the primary color, if you hover over this, you can actually fine tune exactly what color you want. Again, you can choose whatever colors you want, but I'm just gonna fine tune my colors just a little bit. Yeah, I wanna make my scaffold a bit darker. And that's looking pretty good. Now let's have a look at light mode just while we're here. And that looks pretty good, but again, I want to fine tune just a smidge, make the body a bit lighter. And yeah, that looks pretty good so far. Okay, cool. So it's looking good so far. Now we just included these comments. So now if I go to the post and we go to this individual post page, I want to display the comments under here. Right, and I actually want to have a way to post a new comment as well. So I'm actually going to change this to a stateful widget. So if you hover your mouse over this and you hit option dot, I believe it is, you can change this to a stateful widget. And now I can have a text controller. And let's store the list of locally stored comments here. Let's have a loading boolean. And let's prepare our qubits as well. So in the initial state, let's load the comments. And by the way, it's good practice to dispose of all of our controllers just to control for memory leaks. Now the main thing here is loading the comments for this post. Right, so at the start, let's just say loading is true. And we're going to try to go to our post qubit to get the comments for this post. Okay, if we have it, let's update the state successfully. And otherwise, we're just going to display the error. Cool, so now that we can load comments, let's also add a new comment. Right, let's clear whatever's in the comment text controller at the beginning and show a new dialog box. And we can provide our text field so that they can write their comment. We're going to have our actions, so our two buttons again, so cancel button and yes button. And remember, if we're going to click yes, I just want to do a quick check here to make sure that the comment isn't empty. If that's all good, then we can start loading this and we can get the username, which I'm just going to use the email. And we can add the comment via the qubit. Sweet, and we need a method to delete the comment. Again, just a show dialog box. So I'm just going to copy all that, but just change it up to delete the comment. And we don't need a text field. We don't need all this. We just need to change up the yes button and start loading. And we go to our post qubit and delete the comment. Now, I actually need to have a parameter to pass through the comment ID. And so once we've deleted it via the qubit, then we can reload all comments. And that's looking pretty good. So now we are up to just building the UI. So we've got the scaffold, the app bar, and the body. Now in the app bar, let's have an action at the top right to add a new comment button. So this will just be a plus icon, and we can show add comment box. So if I click on this, you can see there's our box, and we can add a comment. Sweet. And now in the body, one thing you can do is we can have a pull to refresh. So this might be helpful if you use a refresh indicator. And anytime that they pull down, we can load the comments on the refresh. And once we've loaded the comments, let's use a list view so that at the top we've got the post. There it is. And beneath that, we need the comments, right? So maybe we could use a divider. And actually, yeah, they have an indent and an end indent already inside the divider. So we don't need to use any paddings for this. So actually, let's come back to our home page. I think we used a divider earlier. Yeah, over here. Remember we added the padding horizontally? Let's remove that because they already have an indent and an end indent, which serves the same purpose. So that looks cleaner. And then now we need to display the comments. So let's just check if it's loading. Okay, if it's loading, just show a loading circle. If there's no comments, then just say that there are no comments. And then finally, that means the last situation is the comments are loaded. So we can display that in a list view. Let's get each comment from the comments and return our comment tile UI. So just a text widget for now. Sweet. Now if I save this, you can see there's a bit of an error. It's got an unbound height And this happens when you have a list view and you didn't specify the height. And specifically in this current situation, we have a list view inside of another list view. So what you can do is in the nested list view, I want you to say shrink wrap is true, and physics, let's say never scrollable physics. And so if you save this, then everything should work perfectly. And you can see there's our first comment. Second comment. There it is. So the functionality is working beautifully. Now we just need to decorate this up. So I'm going to create a new component for the comment tile. Right, let's just require a comment and just decorate it up and make it look nice. So we've got the text and the username. And the delete button as well. So just to see what this looks like, I want you to come back to the post page, and when we return this, let's now return the comment tile. And yep, that's what it looks like so far. I'm going to use a spacer to push out in the middle. And just use some proper alignments and paddings and decoration. And that's looking pretty good. Sweet. Now, if I click on this delete button, one thing about deleting is you only want to be able to delete if you own the post or the comment, right? You can't go delete other people's comments. So that's one thing we need to check. So at the start of this build method, I want you to get the username of the current signed in user, right? Which means we're going to go to our auth qubit and try to get that guy. So once we have the current username, let's check if the comment was created by this user and put it in this can delete boolean. So if this user can delete it because they own the comment, then we'll show the delete button. So if I just save this and I log out, I'm going to create a new account, let's say Bill Gates. And I go into this post, you can see that Steve Jobs made these comments, and you can see I can't see a delete button. But if Bill Gates adds a new comment, you can see that the delete button is there because now we are able to delete our own post. So that's nice, which means that I'm going to actually require this function at the top. And coming back to our post page and our comment tile, you got that red squiggle because we need to pass through our delete method. So let's save this and try again. I'm going to go to that post with the Bill Gates comment, and if I delete the comment, yay, it deletes nicely. Which means we should do the same thing for the post. Like you can only delete posts that you own, right? So we're going to grab this bit of code and let's do the same thing in the post page. Or maybe better is if we can just put it directly in the post tile. So in our delete button again, only if you can delete it are we showing that delete button, and it's gone now. And just to test this out, for the post in the home page, if I create a new post as Bill Gates, then you can see that we can see the delete button just for that post. Beautiful! But now all the functionality for the commenting and all that is working. Now let's update our comment count. Right, so in our post tile, we can specify the comment count, right? So if I just, for example, just say 1, you can see they all say 1. If I say 2, they all say 2. So this number is what we can control. So the main method here is when we build the category posts, let's add another parameter for the comment counts. And this should be in our state. So we're just going to pass that information through. Beautiful. And so when we're creating the list of posts for this category, we are getting the individual posts, and then let's get the comment count for this post as well. If it doesn't exist, then let's just say 0, and we can pass that through. Sweet. And if you save it, you can see that it's showing the right number of comments. And if I click into it, oh, it looks like it's not updating there. And let's come to our post page and our post tile. And yep, for this one as well, we're going to pass through our comments. Beautiful. And it's updating very well. So we just did the functionality for adding a post and deleting a post, as well as comments as well. So that is really cool. So I've got my image icon prepared on my desktop. It's a PNG file. So once you've got that prepared, let's open up our project and drag it into our assets folder. Then coming back to our code, you can see we should have that assets folder with the image. And this is the package we're going to use. So it's called Flutter Launcher Icons. And so I want you to go to this documentation if you need any specific instructions on certain things. So I can show you real quick how to do this simply for our iOS app. So firstly, in the terminal, let's add in the package. And then go to your pubspec.yaml, and you can see there it is. Now let's specify some certain things. So let's say iOS is true. And then there's this remove alpha iOS thing that we have to say true. So I'm just going to remove this. This is just one of the more recent updates. You can make your icon dynamically change. But I'm just going to say remove that part. And then the image path is the most important thing. So save that. And then in our terminal, we can run this command now. So dart run, and then run the package. And successfully generated. Beautiful. Now let's go to our code and just rebuild the app. My code has been rebuilt. Now hopefully if I go to my home screen, yay, you can see the icon has been changed. Beautiful. Now, one thing I want you to do is, if you open up Xcode, you know this bundle ID. We set this at the very beginning of the course. So now we're going to use this to go to our App Store Connect, and let's create our new app. So let's try to publish our app finally. So select a name and fill these things out. For the SKU, if this is your first app, just say 001 and let's create. Now the name is taken, so I'm just going to say like Moonbase with a $sign. And I've already made apps before, so I think I'm up to number 6. There we go. Sweet, so we are now on this submission page and we just need to fill everything out. Coming back to our code, you can see the app. I want you to go to iOS runner and then info.plist. And this display name, you can see it says BLM app. So I'm going to change this to just whatever I want, so Moonbase. And then again, if I just rebuild the app, hopefully it'll give us the good name. Yes, there it is, Moonbase. Sweet. And then now let's go to our terminal and type flutter build iOS. Done. Now open up your Xcode again. And at the top, if you go to the product tab, go to archive, and it'll start to build the app for us. So this will take a little bit of time, but once it's done, it'll show you this, and we can distribute app to the App Store Connect. Cool. So again, this will take a little bit of time, and you'll get an email from Apple when the build has been finished. And we've actually got this warning, and it's not a big deal, but just to explain what this SDK version issue is. So we've got iOS 17.5. It says starting from April 24, 2025, it has to require 18 for the iOS. And it's included in Xcode 16. So if I look at my Xcode version, I'm currently on 15.4. So I'm just going to need to update it. That's just a normal, regular thing you're going to have to do. Cool. So like I said, you'll get an email in a few minutes or a little bit of time that your build has been finished processing. And so if you just refresh the page, you can see now we can add the build, and there it is. Let's say none of the algorithms because we didn't use any encryption, and save it. So this is looking good. Now, let's just finalize some things actually before we submit this. Like the post has so much text. Let's go to our post tile. And I want to see how I'm doing this. So we got the title, we got the content. Let's actually max lines and say 3 for the max lines. And overflow, let's have a little ellipsis, ... 2 lines. And at the top, I'm going to accept the boolean to see if we should show the full content or not, which by default, let's just say false. So depending on if we're showing the full content, if we are, then max line is null, otherwise it's 2. So what we just did is I want to be able to go to the post and then I want to see the entire post, right? So in our post page, let's say show full content equals to true. And so you can see in the home page, it's kind of got a summary and then you click into the post to see the full thing. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to clean up some of this UI stuff and make it look nicer. And if I add a new comment, okay, that's what it looks like. So let's try to decorate and space everything out appropriately. Now I want to change that cancel icon. Let's change it to a more options. And you get these ... And same thing for this one, for the comment tile. So I'm going to space everything out appropriately. And that's looking pretty good. Now, the next thing I want to clean up is maybe let's not show the entire email. So if you go to the post, you can see for the username, yeah, we're just using the email. So I'm just going to change this up and maybe just get the username portion so that we don't display the full email. And so this stuff is kind of up to you how you want to do this. But for the display username, let's just get everything before the @ sign. Nice. And we're going to do the same thing for the comment tile. So I'm going to copy this. And do it for the comment. Cool. Now I actually populated this with the extra posts. I just put some random posts in. And in the comment tile, we've actually got a bit of an overflow problem. So this text is where it is. Now it's in this column, which is inside this row. So grab the column and let's expand it. And let's get rid of the spacer in between. Nice. Everything's looking really good. So I want you to just test it out and fix anything that needs to be fixed. Now we can go to our terminal and build the iOS app again. Cool, it's done. So let's go to Xcode and repeat the process. So product, and then we can archive it. And anytime you need to update the build, this is how you can do it. Now that's done, we can distribute it to the App Store. And again, just wait a few minutes or a few moments, and then you'll get an email saying the build is processed. So then if we go down here, we can get rid of the first build and select our new one. And we can save that one. Now what we need to do is we need to do screenshots. So I want you to just screenshot the main pages. Maybe even the dark mode would be useful. And then you can see here, it tells you in the screenshots what exact specification that we need. So this part is required. So we need to drag up to 10 screenshots in here. So you can see these sizes with the pixels. Now to get this exact size, you can use any tool that you want. I like to use Canva because it's free. And so you can go to a custom size, and I'm going to use this exact pixel size. And you can see I've already did it before. So for the width and the height, and let's just create the design, and let's just import our screenshots in. And just fill it up. And I think I'm going to do a total of like 4 screenshots. And these you can always change in the future. So I'm just going to simply put our screenshots in. Sweet, so there's our 4 pictures. And then I'm going to download this. Sweet. And then I want you to drag those images into your App Store Connect. And you can rearrange them in order if you like. And that's looking really good. Now, one thing that I just noticed is you can see the iPad, it says required for the iPad. Now you can make iPad screenshots too, but just to make our life a little bit easier, I'm going to just go to our Xcode and actually just remove the iPad, and let's not support it. Like I said, if you want to support iPad, then you just need to do the screenshots for it, but let's just keep it simple and remove the iPad. And I'm actually going to just do the build again. Cool, so third time's the charm. Done, and let's just wait a few minutes for it to process. You'll get an email from Apple. And once you got that, let's refresh the page and just give it our new build. Awesome. And then I'm going to drag my images in again here. And you can see it's got the required just for the iPhone, and we don't need to worry about iPad now. Nice. Then let's go ahead and fill out some of these. So just give it your app a description. And just put some keywords in. I guess it will help for search. And this support URL. So this is just going to be the domain name. Now let's just leave that for a second. And copyright. Now we have an account-based app, so let's put in the test Gmail so that the tester can actually use that account and try to test our app. Cool, so let's just come back to our app and actually create that test account for the Apple people. Nice. And then this is looking really good. In the app information, let's give it a subtitle. We can pick a category. And you can set up the content rights. So mine is a very simple app, so it has none of these things. There we go. And that's pretty much it. And in the app privacy, yeah, we have to give it the privacy policy, which we'll do in just a second. We need the landing page for that one. And down here, let's hit get started. And data collection, no, we're not collecting data for any third-party reasons. Let's go to pricing and availability. So let's just say $0, so it's a free download. And let's let the app be available to all countries. Sweet, so that's the general information. Now you can always just hit add for review to see what we're missing, right? So yeah, we've got that privacy policy and the support URL that we need to do. So that brings us on to the landing page stuff. On my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder called landing page. And I'm going to open up the VS Code. And let's open that specific folder we just created. Let's create a new file and just save it so that we can have it in there. So we're going to call it index.html. And this is where all of the websites are going to begin. So I'm just going to put the basic setup here. So this is the HTML. We're going to use the English language. And let's start with the head. So I'm going to put enough comments here to explain and make it simple for everyone. So this is just the basic setup that we need to do, like the character set and also like the width. And then the title, I'm going to call it Moonbase. So just with this, if you save it and you try to run it, I'm going to use the Chrome browser. You can see it's just blank, but at the top left, you got that Moonbase title. So this is the website that we're going to start building in. So this is really cool. So first thing I'm going to do is let's do the styles for the layout and the design. So at the top, you can have a kind of global style to apply for the entire page in the body. So just to show you under here in the body, in the header, let's have the first heading and just say landing page. And if you save that, you can see that's what it looks like by default. So let's say I want to change the font. Yep, that looks nice. I'm going to try to comment everything as much as I can to make it clear for you. So under the main heading, we can have a subheading. Like that. And so you can see at the styles at the top, let's say text align to the center. And you can actually be more specific with the style. So let's say the header section. I'm going to choose a background color, which you can hover your mouse over to see exactly what this is. So that's our background. Now I kind of want it like a light gray color for this. We can add some padding and some margin. And we can be more specific with the heading style. So like the heading 1, I can change the font size. You can see a bigger size. For the heading 2, let's make it a bit smaller, 1.25. You can control the font weight as well as the color. And even that's looking pretty nice and minimal. But let's keep this going. So in the content, so under the headings, we can have a button now, which we use with an A for anchor. Let's say just download on iOS. Cool, and there it is. You can click on this. Now just for the styling for this button, let's give it a kind of darker color. And the text color, let's make it white. Let's give some padding. And I want to get rid of that underline. So let's say none for the text decoration. And let's have a border radius. Cool, now I like that button. But I want to have some space. So for the heading 2, let's have a margin on the bottom. And it's looking good so far. Cool, so if you come down to the body here, let's have a navigation section. So we've got some links that I want to put in. So we want a home link and then the privacy policy link. Nice, looks like it's getting centered. So just for the navigation part, I want to specify at the top. So we got the background color and some padding. And I want to align this to the right hand side. Yep, that looks good. Cool, and the individual links, let's also style that up. Cool, I like that. Now, last thing is on the very bottom, so under the header section, let's have a main content section. So I'm just going to say like hello, so you can see like that's where it is. So later you can fill this out with more content, as well as the style. Now let's create a new file called privacy policy. And we're going to do a similar setup here. And when I come back to my index.html, you see the nav links. When I click on this, let's go to the privacy policy.html. And then so now if you save it, you can click on it and then we can go to this page. Beautiful. So now we can start decorating up the privacy policy page. So I'm actually going to copy the navigation section because it's going to be the same thing. And for the reference here, instead of hash, we can now go to index.html. Sweet. So you can see we can now just go back and forth using these links. Beautiful. So now for the header section, in the main title, let's say privacy policy. Let's have a subheading. And it's good to say like effective date and just put in a date. Now in the main content section, this is where we're going to have all the contents. So starting with the section 1, we got the introduction. I'm going to say like welcome to Moonbase, ... And so I'm going to copy this bit of text in just to save our time. And then we got section 2 for the information that we collect. I'm going to put that in an unordered list. And then you can see the list item. We can start putting that in there. Cool. So for this section, I'm just going to let it ride out because it's going to be kind of repetitive. Cool, so now we've got all the content in there. Let's try to style this up a bit better. So starting with the global style for the entire body, I just want to use the sans serif font and just align it to the center. The nav style, I want to align to the right. And let's use the same nav link style as we had before. So actually, I'm going to copy the entire style from the index.html and just copy it in. And that's looking really good. Okay, so we just need to fix up some of this alignment. So in the main content style, let's say text align left. And that is looking really nice. One other thing is when you fully open up the window, it's just going to fill up the space, which is actually not what I want. So I'm going to max out the width at 800 so that it does this sort of behavior. And if I say margin to be auto, it's just going to have the kind of margin and the padding the same from the left and right. So kind of centers everything. And then I'm just going to fine tune it with some extra margin. And maybe we can make a line height of 1.5. This is looking really, really good so far. And so this privacy policy, you can see I'm using Moonbase, but you can replace it with your app name as well as this email. You should use your own email. Beautiful. Now let's try to host this so that other people can access it and you can just give the link around. So if you go to your GitHub, we can create a new repository. Let's call it My Landing Page. And then just create it. And so coming back to our code, in your terminal, let's say git init, and then git add with a dot to add everything. And then we can put in our first commit. Beautiful. Then we can go to our branch. So git branch main. So I'm actually just copying all of these instructions here, as you can see. So let's remote add origin to that repository we just created. And then we can finally push it. Cool. So once that's done, you can see if you just refresh the page that our code has been uploaded. Beautiful. And then what you can do is in the settings, go to pages, and then the branch, just choose your main branch, and this will deploy it. So it'll just take a minute or two. And just while we're waiting here, you can see the custom domain part. So later on, you can actually buy your own domain name and then put it here so that you can have a clean website name, right? So currently, you can see your site is live at this GitHub page. So if I click on it, our landing page is now live. And so you can see the URL is the Mitch Coco GitHub URL. So that's what I'm talking about. You can actually use your domain name if you have one. So that's something to think about when you go down the line for the custom domain. but this will do for us. And the main thing that we wanted is actually this privacy policy page, right? So now that we have a link that is live on the internet, we can now come back to the App Store Connect, and I want to add the review, but we are just needing this privacy policy. So we can now give it the URL. And also, there's also a support URL that we need to specify. So that's just your website URL. Cool. And that should be good to go. So now we can save it and add for review. Submit to app review. And it has been submitted. So now it's waiting for Apple people to review your code and just make sure everything's good. Cool, so you should have gotten an email and it came back pretty quickly with a rejection. And now this is very normal. So we just need to read through what the Apple people said in our review. So if we just read this together, it says, we found in our review that your app includes user-generated content but does not have all the required precautions. Apps with user-generated content must take specific steps to moderate content and prevent abusive behavior. That's fair enough. So next steps to resolve this issue, please revise your app to implement the following precautions. We have to require that the users agree to the EULA terms of service and make it clear that there is no tolerance for objectionable content and abusive behavior. Yep, so we're going to make the terms of service. Also, we need a mechanism for users to flag objectionable content, as well as a mechanism for users to block users. So let's try to do that now. So starting with the terms of service, if I come back to my app, when the user registers a new account and they hit sign up, let's ask them to agree to the terms of service at this point. So if I go to the auth, let's actually create a new folder here called constants, and I'm going to create the EULA.dart. So EULA stands for End User License Agreement, and it's just the terms of service. So it's going to be a big block of text, and this will be something I'm going to copy in that we had from before. And you can customize this for your own terms of service, of course. Now in our register page, there's our register method, and we're going to have to ensure at this part, right, once we do all of our checks and then we register the user, I want to have a show EULA box. So let's just create that down here. So I'm going to open up an alert dialog for the terms of service and put in our EULA text. Cool, so let's just see what this looks like. So just before you register the user, I want to show the EULA box. And I just want to test this out. So if I try to fill out these fields and the user wants to sign up, so we are at this stage. And when I sign up, you can see that this terms of service is shown. Great. And one thing I want to do actually is just for the UI part, let's have a scroll controller. And wrap this in a scroll bar. And so I'm just going to rebuild this. And when I try to sign up, you can see that scroll bar on the right hand side. So yeah, I just want to include that because to let the user know that there's more to scroll down. And at the very bottom, we want to have some buttons. So let's create that in our actions. We got the cancel button and the agree button. Cool, and one thing I want to show you here is you see how this feature is returning a boolean, right? So when I show the dialog, this entire thing is going to have to return a boolean. So let's say by default, I'm going to say false. And in our cancel button, you see when we pop the dialog, we can actually say false. So that's what this will return if the user cancels. And then if I create my agree button and they hit agree, then I want to return true. Right, so when we call this box, actually what's going to happen is we can store the value of the boolean if it's accepted or not. Right, if the user did accept it, then we'll go ahead and do the register from our auth qubit. Sweet, so let's just test this out. I'm just going to fill out the register and try to sign up. And oh, the scroll bar. Scroll bar is good, but I actually want to show it all the time. So let's say thumb visibility is true. There we go. And if I hit cancel, then it's going to return false. So we're just back to the sign up page. If we hit agree, then it's going to be true. And now we can sign up and go to the home page. Beautiful. Now it's time for the moderation. So let's create that new feature and create the 3 layers. And starting with the domain layer in our entity, I want to create a blocked user class. So I'm going to store some of the important information. So the ID, the blocker ID, the blocked ID, as well as the blocked email. Nice. And then let's create our repository folder and we can have our moderation repo. So the functionality is we want the blocking functionality. And the content moderation functionality. Cool, so this is the main method that we need to fill out. Now in the data, let's create our Firebase moderation repository. And actually implement this repository. Cool, so you can see the red squiggle because we got to implement those methods. So we got the block user, unblock user, get blocked users, is user blocked, and report content. Nice. So at the top, let's get access to the Firestore as well as our authentication. And when we block the user, let's firstly get the current user. And then let's create a unique block record ID. So I'm just going to combine the current user ID as well as the blocked user ID. So this will be a unique string. And maybe we'll put an underscore in between. And let's use interpolation. So this unique string is what we're going to use. And then we can create our blocked user entry. So that's what I'm going to fill in. And then we can save that in our Firebase. So I'm going to save it under the users collection for this current user. And we're going to have another collection for the blocked users and store it here. Sweet, so that's how we block the user. We're going to do something similar for unblocking the user. So let's get that unique record ID so that we know what relationship we're looking at. And let's delete it from the Firestore. Cool. Next, we want to get all the blocked users as a list. So we can do that by going to our users collection and getting the blocked user collection. And then let's just format it to return it as a nice list. Cool. And then finally, this one will also be helpful just to know if this user is blocked or not. And see if we have a relationship with this other person. And so we're going to go to our user collection and just see if we have that person in the blocked user list. And so we're going to return a Boolean. Nice. And then finally, we need to be able to report some content. Right? So let's get our current user. Let's create a unique report ID. And let's create the report data. So the report is going to have an ID for itself, and then the content ID. So like which piece of content are we reporting? The author ID, so who owns this piece of content, as well as the reporter. So who is the person that's reporting it? That is the current user. And finally, we can have a reason. And the reported at timestamp. And so once we've got all that, let's save it in our Firebase. Cool. So that's all the implementation in terms of the Firebase. Since we've got the data layer, we've done the domain layer. Now let's move on to the presentation and let's create our qubits. So starting with the moderation states. I'm going to call it moderation state. So we're going to have just the initial, the loading, the blocked users loaded. That means we can have the list of blocked users. And then the user blocked, user unblocked, and content reported state. And let's actually have some error states as well. Cool, so these are the different states I want to use. Now in our moderation qubit, remember the qubit is all just responsible for the state management, right? So we can pass through our moderation state. So just like normal at the top, I'm going to require the repository. And it's always helpful to just be able to cache the blocked users so that we can store it locally. And the formality, let's have the getter. And let's create our first method. So load all blocked users. Now when we do this, I'm going to just say loading and then go to our repo to get the blocked users. And then we can omit the blocked users loaded and pass through the list. Cool, and if we have an error, just omit the error state. Cool. Now moving on to when we want to block a user. Same thing, we just want to start loading, go to our repository to block the user. And then if that's done, then we can omit the user blocked state. And once that's all done, I actually want to just reload all of the blocked users. Cool. And similar thing for unblocking a user. And let's check if the user is blocked. So we're just going to go to our blocked user ID list and just see if we have this UID. And finally, we can report the content. Cool, so let's omit the correct states like loading, and then go to our repository to report the actual content. And then if that's done, then we can say content reported. Cool, and that is the qubit done. So remember this file here, the qubits, is responsible for the state management, meaning this emitting these states around the actual functionality. Nice. And then one thing I want to do is if you go to your comment as well as the post, I actually want to add in another parameter here just for the UID. So I'm going to add this to be able to identify the person for blocking, right? In other words, like who owns this post. And let's do the same thing for the comment. And then now it looks like we have some red squiggles in the post qubit. Yep. Because when we create these posts, we have to actually require the UID because we just made that now. Same thing for the comment. And looks like we have red squiggles in the home page. So yep, the create post, we have to pass through the UID. So let's pass through the current user when they make the post. And in the post page, same thing for the comment. Yes, we want to know who's posting these comments. This is looking good. So now let's come to our main function and we have these repos. So we actually created a new one now, the moderation repository. And in our block provider, let's provide our qubit as well. So you got the auth, you got the post. Now we want to have the moderation qubit. Cool. And at the very beginning, maybe let's load blocked users just at the very beginning. Similar to how we're just checking the auth at the very beginning. Sweet. And now let's go to our post tile and I want to have the options so that I can report and block this person. So in the post tile, let's get the moderation qubit to check the blocked status. And so currently all we have is the delete button, right? And if I just create a new post, you can see that only my post, like the one that you own, will have these dots to delete it, right? So for this one, I'm going to actually say build more options because I want the delete button, but I also want a block button and a report button, right? So let's actually create this build more options widget at the top here, just to make our code nice and organized. So if I just use a pop-up menu button, I want to use the more horizontal icon, and let's fill this out. So in the item builder, we are going to have a list of pop-up options. And this is going to depend on if it's the user's own post, right? Right, so up here, instead of saying can delete, basically this boolean is for if its own post. So let's say that. And so if it's the user's own post, then we'll want to show the delete button. And let's just give it a value to identify it. Now, if it's someone else's post, then we want to have a block option. As well as the report option. Cool, and then we can return these options. So if I just save this, you can see if I click on the more options, you can see we can block the user and report it for other people's posts. And if I go to my own post, then it will just say delete. Nice. Sweet, and then now we can fill out the onSelected. So we can check the value to see if it's delete, block, or report. And for each of these ones, we can go ahead and call the actual functionalities. Let's also go to the scaffold messenger just to show a snack bar to let the user know what's happening. And for the reporting part, report is going to have to require a little bit extra stuff. So I'm just going to create that separately here for the show report dialog box, because for this one, I actually want to know the reason. Right, so let's start by getting our moderation qubit. And let's have a text controller. Let's show a dialog. And I want to include a text field so that we can get the user to enter a reason as to why they're reporting. Right? So if I save this, yeah, we can now type some text in here. And let's actually make the column to be a minimum size. There we go. And finally, let's have the buttons. So we got the cancel button and the report button. So for the report button, if it's not empty, then we can call the moderation qubit and report the content. And if that is all successful, then we're going to pop the box and let's show the confirmation by showing a snack bar. Sweet, this is looking very good. So now if I save this, let's actually test this out. If I hit the block user, you can see at the bottom it says on the snack bar, blocked user, and let's try the report button. It says reported successfully. So if I come back to my Firestore, you can see that it's all got it here. So the content report, nice. And if I go to the users, you can see under the user, we have the blocked users. Nice. Now it looks like the blocked UID is actually blank. And that's because when we first set up this app, we didn't actually include the UID. Now, since we made a lot of changes to our data structure, I'm actually going to delete all of our collections and just start fresh. And same thing for the authentication in our users. I have a bunch of these accounts that I was just using. Let's just go ahead and delete everything. And I'm just going to leave the test account for the Apple person and then my own email. Cool, so everything is blank. So if I just refresh this, yep, it's a blank app. So if I sign into Mitch, let's try to create a new post. And this is my own post, so you can see I can delete it. Nice. And let's just create the post again. And let's log out. And try to go to the test account. So go to a different account and let's see if we can see the block and report. Nice. So I can report and come back to my Firestore and just see if everything's good. Yes, so now we got the UID and that's useful because the content report, we can actually see all the important information about the reporting. This is looking good. Let's also try to block the user. And in our Firestore, if I refresh it, sweet. Under each user, we know the list of blocked users. And we got their UID now. Beautiful. So all the information is getting saved in our Firestore appropriately. I just want to quickly test this for the comments as well. And looks like everything's working fine. Cool, so let me just sign back out and sign into the Mitch Coco. And looks like for the comment tile, I don't have a option button. So let's go to the comments tile. This is going to be similar for what we just made in the post tile. So I'm just going to copy that. And let's paste it into this and just change it to be comments. Cool, and same thing in the post tile again. I just want to grab this bit of code here for the moderation cupid and just change it up to be the comment. And let's also grab the build more options as well. And change it to be comments. Sweet, so at the very bottom you can see we just have only a delete button, but now we can have a build more options. Amazing. Cool. So now we can even report a comment. Let's check in our Firebase, refresh it. And yes, we can now report posts as well as comments. Sweet. So coming back to the blocked users, looks like we have a blocked user here. So if you block a user, right, let's just sign out and sign into the test account. So you can see that post by Mitch Coco. I can't see a block user option because we already blocked this person. Which means we actually don't want to see any of the posts from anyone who we blocked, right? So what we're going to do is let's go to our post qubit, and you can see here we are loading all the posts. So just while we're here, let's actually include the moderation qubit. And then so after we load all the posts, I want to just filter out the blocked users posts. Right, that's looking good. Now, just coming back to our main.dat file, let's go to red squiggle. Because yeah, we got to pass through the moderation qubit. Cool, and looks like we're getting a bit of an error, but that's completely fine. I'm going to try to just kill this and run it again because we included some new providers. And it looks like we have this error, so could not find the correct moderation qubit above the post qubit. Oh, I see. So what we need to do is let's grab the post qubit and just put it below the moderation qubit. So we want to make sure to load the blocked users before we load up all the posts. So if I just refresh this, yep, looks like everything's working fine now. But it looks like we can still see the blocked users posts. So let's do some investigating. At the very beginning in our main.dat file for our moderation qubit, we are loading the blocked users. Now I'm actually going to just get rid of that. And let's actually be more precise with this one. So in our post qubit, when we load the posts, let's firstly make sure that the load blocked users is actually getting loaded in our qubit. So I'm going to use the keyword await. So what this does is the rest of the code is not going to finish until the load blocked users is done. So that's what await does. So that's going to be useful because then we can load the posts after that's all done. And that's it. Cool, and it looks like the posts are not showing. Yep, if I log out and log back into the Mitch Coco, I should be able to see that post. Yep, there it is. But if I log out and go to the test account, we should not be able to see it because we blocked that person. And again, I want to test this for vice versa. So if I just create a post for the test and I log out and sign back into the Mitch Coco. Yep, so you can see everything's working. We can now block people. Now, one issue I see right now is we can block a user and everything is getting blocked. But when we do block someone, we should actually refresh everything. So at the top here in the post initial, let's actually listen to if a user gets blocked and then we can reload the post. So this is a cool thing we can do is go to the qubit and we can go to the stream and listen for an event. And so this state, if you hover over it, it's got that moderation state. And so if the state is user blocked, like someone got blocked or the user got unblocked, then let's reload the post. Okay, so let's try this again. So coming back to our Firebase, I'm going to delete the blocked users so that we can start from fresh. So if I refresh this, cool. So we can see the test post. And if I block this person, then it will reload. That is what this is doing. Good stuff. Cool. Now, finally, what we need to do is in our settings page, we need to have a way to be able to unblock people. So under presentations in the moderation, let's create a pages. So blocked users page. And let's go to the settings page and create this settings tile. So if I click on this, we want to navigate to our new page. Okay, sweet. So there it is. And if I click on this, yes, we can go to this new page. So on this blocked users page, we want to list out all the users, right? So let's get the moderation qubit. And let's ensure that the blocked users are loaded. And in the body, we're going to use a block builder. So we've got the different states, right? The loading. If it's loading, then show a progress indicator. If it's loaded, then let's grab our blocked users. And if there are no blocked users, then let's just say it's empty. And finally, we can use a list view builder. So let's go through all the blocked users and get each individual blocked user. And let's try to get the display name. And finally, return it as a list tile UI. Nice, you can see that test is there, that blocked user that we had from before. Cool, so let's just decorate this up a bit. And in the trailing icon, I want to have an unblock button. And if we unblock them successfully, then let's show a confirmation with a snack bar like usual. And I want to test this out. So let's click on this X and it says test unblocked. And if I come back to my home page, yay, we can now see the tests posts. And let's try it again. So if I block this person, then yes, we can see the blocked users and then we can unblock them. Beautiful. Now, one little UI thing in the settings page, for the settings tile, let's actually give it a color here, tertiary. Yep, there we go. Nice, this is working so well. We can block people now. So the same thing that we did for the post, we should do for the comment, right? We don't want to be able to see the comments on blocked people. So in our post qubit, we did this in the load posts, but we should do it for the get comments as well. So you see this part where we are doing the filtering, right? So let's firstly get all the comments from the repo. And let's filter out the comments from the blocked users, similar to what we did for the posts. Cool, and then once we filter them out, then we can return all the comments. Sweet, so if I just refresh this, yay, we can no longer see that person's comment. If I unblock them, then sweet, we can start seeing the comments again. Beautiful. So that's all the moderation done. Now, one little thing I kind of missed out on was when we did the EULA, like the terms of service agreement, we did that for this register page, right? Like when they try to sign up, we are showing this terms of service box, but we should also do it for the login page, right? So in our register page, like this part here, before we register, where we are agreeing to the EULA terms of service, we should do the similar thing for in our login page when they're trying to log in with the Apple or Google. So we get our login method, but at the very bottom when we do the OAuth, I'm just going to include the EULA part here before we sign in with Apple. So let's come back to the register page to grab that EULA box. And let's show the EULA box just before we do the signing in with Apple, as well as signing in with Google. Nice. So if I test this out, if I want to sign in with Apple, we can agree to the terms of service and then it'll take us through to the sign in. Beautiful. Awesome. So everything's ready for us to resubmit our build. Now, if I just log in, I made all these random posts again just to fill it up. Now in our terminal, let's say Flutter build iOS. There it is. And then let's open up our Xcode, go to the product, archive, and let's wait for this to build. There it is, and let's distribute it to the App Store Connect. Done. So if I come back to my App Store Connect, remember it was rejected for these 3 reasons, which we have now fixed. So if I come back here and you scroll down where we have the build, we are going to have to put in our new build. So when your new build has been done processing, like I said, you will get an email. It should take not that long, maybe a few minutes or so. And let's just select the new build. Save it. And then we can add for review. Nice. And if you have any questions or problems, you can actually reply and message to this person. But let's resubmit to app review because I think everything should be good to go. Sweet, item submitted. So let's just wait for the Apple people to review it and hopefully you'll get this email saying that it was successful and your app is ready for distribution. So you should be able to see it and download it from the App Store. Now it's time for the monetization. If I come to Revenue Cat, let's create a new project and add an App Store app. Let's enter our bundle ID. And remember, if you don't know where your bundle ID is, in your App Store Connect, in the information, it is this bundle ID here. And then we have to have this App Store Connect specific shared secret. So if you look at this information, it's got really nice instructions. So I want you to read this, and it's even got these screenshots to tell you exactly what you need to do. So this is what I'm following. So let's go to our App Store Connect. And if you scroll down this section here, so it says the app specific shared secret is a unique code to receive receipts for only this app's auto renewable subscription. So we need to do this for the subscription. So let's generate this secret key. And I want you to copy this key and then set it in the Revenue Cat. It's looking good. And if I just keep going down, you can see you got the in-app purchase key configuration as well. So required for the most accurate pricing and country-specific data for your App Store transaction. After uploading this key, you may see updates to your historical data. So if you just go to the learn more, again, it's got really specific and clear instructions on what you need to do. So I'm always going to show you the documentation because this will have the most up-to-date information. And if you have any questions, then you should go to this documentation. Now you can see it's telling us to go to the users and access and the in-app purchase section. So just coming back to the top, we need to go to users and access and go to the integrations. And you can see I've already generated the key for me, but you can click on this plus button and I want you to generate a new key. Okay, once your key is generated, it will appear in the active keys and you get one shot to download it. So for the name, I'm just going to call it Pro Subscription Key, and then you'll have some sort of key ID and you can download it. Now, I've already downloaded mine, so I don't have a link there, but you should have a download link. And then if I come back to the revenue cat, I want you to paste it or upload that P8 file that you downloaded and drag it here. And you only need to do this once for the very beginning. So after that, any future apps that you want to use, you can see here, I can just use my existing key. So if this is your first time doing it, just download this key and then upload it here. And we have these two fields to fill out the key ID and the issuer ID as well from our App Store Connect. Cool. And then the last thing we need to do is this App Store Connect API. So an App Store Connect API key is required if you want to import products into Revenue Cat. Have product price changes automatically and applied. So this is a really recommended step to do. Well, actually, it's required. So if we click on the Learn More, again, it's got all the appropriate instructions in the documentations with nice screenshots. It says here, the newly created key needs to have at least the access level of App Manager. And then once you download the P8 key file, take note of the issuer ID, and we're just going to upload it to the Revenue Cat. So let's do that in our App Store Connect API. Again, I've already created my API keys, so you can go ahead and create one for yourself. Again, once you download that file, just upload it here. And so I've already done that. I'm just going to use my existing key and I want you to fill out these things. Awesome. And then let's hit save and our app is created successfully. Now coming back to the App Store Connect, if you scroll down to the subscriptions, it says here the first subscription must be submitted with a new app version. So create your subscription, then select it from the app's in-app purchase before you do the app review. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our first subscription group. I'm just going to call it Pro Subscription. And let's create our subscription. So I'm going to have a monthly. And for the product ID, you can see it's a unique alphanumeric ID. So you can just call it whatever kind of unique ID. So for example, my app's name is Moonbase. So let's say Moonbase_pro_month. And we can select a subscription duration, let's say 1 month. Set up the availability. I'm just going to do every country. And then you can select a price for yourself. And let's confirm it. Cool. And then let's save this. And I'm going to create another subscription for the yearly. And just pick a price. Awesome. And let's create this localization. So the display name, I'm just going to call it Moonbase Pro. Awesome. And coming back to our revenue cat, if I go to the entitlements, we have to create our first entitlement. So what this means is giving people like access, right? So I'm going to call it Pro. And the description is just Pro access to all features. And let's add our first product. So you can see here, if I select the app, and then we got the add product. So this is why this setup was so useful that we did at the beginning to connect to App Store Connect. we can now just import products automatically. So you can manually do this and fill it out, but I'm going to click import products. And sweet. So there's the two things from our App Store Connect. Beautiful. And coming back to our entitlements, we can now attach these two products. Sweet. So we got the entitlement with our two products. And then finally, we have to set up this offering. So you can see here it says it's optional, but it's a recommended feature of RevenueCat that can make it easier to change and experiment with your paywalls. So I'm actually going to go hit learn more. And again, I'm always going to show you these documentations so that you can go and find the most precise information. But I can show you how to do this real quick. So let's hit plus, and the identifier, I'm going to call it just the default. And let's say the standard set of packages. And let's create a new package here. So the first one is just monthly. Let's just call it monthly subscription to Pro. And then let's add our product. Cool. And let's actually add another package. So this one is for annual. Right, it's for the yearly subscription to Pro. And select our year product. Beautiful. So finally, we have these offerings that we can now go use in our app. So let's come back to our code, and I'm going to create a new feature called subscriptions. Let's create a new file called RevenueCat service. We need to add the package. So Flutter pub add purchases Flutter. This is the RevenueCat package. And so if you import it, yeah, we want to use that package. Now let's create this RevenueCat service class. And I'll show you how to do the main things here. So starting with the configuration. We just need a API key. And what we're going to do is await. Let's go to the purchases and configure. And then we can give it our API key. And I'm also going to just print it in the debug console. RevenueCat configured successfully. And if we have an error, let's print that as well. Now for the fetching offerings. So let's go to the purchases and get offerings. That's how easy it is. And then we can just return it. And then purchasing a package. So let's just have the package as a parameter. And go to our purchases, and you can see that purchase package option. And then we can just return the customer information. And another useful thing is just a boolean to see if this is a pro user or not. Right, so if I go to the purchases and you get the customer information, I'm just going to write a little comment here just to show you what's actually happening. If you look at the customer info and the entitlements, we can go to the active, and then this will return a map of the active entitlements, where the keys are the entitlement IDs that we set it up in RevenueCat, right? So let's create our boolean is pro, and we're going to go to our active entitlements and see if we have that pro key. coming back to revenue cat, we want to look for this particular identifier, I believe. And if it's all good, let's print and see if this user is a pro or not. And that is all the code that we need for the revenue cat. Now I'm going to create a new folder here for our different layers, right? We've got the presentation layer, and let's create our qubit. And let's actually create a data layer as well and just drag our revenue cat service into that folder. And let's create the subscription states and the subscription qubit. So starting with the states, we're just going to do what we did before. So like the initial, we got the loading state, the loaded state. And if it's loaded, then we should be able to know if this person is pro. And the error state with a message. And I think that's probably all we need. And then we can start to fill out the qubit. So this individual qubit is just going to have one purpose, which is just checking if the user is pro or a free user. So check pro status, and we're going to just emit the loading state. And we're going to go to the revenue cat service that we just created and check if this person is pro. And then once that's done, we can emit the loaded state and then pass through the is pro status. And if we have an error, let's emit the error state with the message. Cool, and that's all I want to do for that one. Now I want to create another qubit for the offerings and the state as well. So separating these out will make your code nice and easy. Now for the offering states, it'll be quite similar. So we got the initial state, the loading state, the loaded state, which means if it's loaded, then that means we should be able to see what packages are available. And if we have an error, let's see what the message is. And I'm going to have a couple extra states here for the purchase loading and the purchase error. And I think that's all good. Actually, in the offerings loaded state, we are actually holding on to just one package, but we have two packages, right? So it should be a list. And let's just call it packages because we might have more than one package. And let's come to our qubit. And remember, this qubit is responsible for fetching and purchasing offerings from revenue cat. It's a good idea to cache the loaded packages so that we have it stored locally. And I'll show you how to fill out the main sections here. Starting with the loading the offerings, I'm just going to emit the loading state first. And let's go to our revenue cat service to fetch the offerings. Now, if the offerings is not null and the offerings that we have currently is not null, in other words, if we have an offering, then let's try to add them. So starting with the monthly package, let's try to add it if it's available. And let's add the yearly package as well if it's available. Cool, and then at the end of it, let's emit the loading state and load up the packages. Now this first if statement is just checking if we have an offering. Now if we don't have any offerings available, then it'll just be blank. And we can load up those offerings. Cool, and just emit the error state if we have any errors. Nice, and finally we got the purchase package. So for the parameters, I just want to know the package that I'm purchasing, of course. And also let's have a function for when it's successful, right? So let's just start by emitting the loading state. Let's try to go to our revenue cat and purchase this particular package. And it will return the customer information. And if it's not null and we have a per entitlement for that person, then we can execute this code. So after purchase, let's call on success to let the app user know that it was successfully purchased. Okay, I'm gonna add in a couple of more specific error catches here, right? If the error code happens to be the purchase cancelled error, what that means is the user cancelled the purchase flow. So they were looking at the new packages and they exited out of it. And if that's the case, let's just revert to the last known offerings and load that up. And at the very end, let's just catch the generic error as well. And that should be all good. So that's the qubit done. Now coming back to our main.dart file, we have to include our new qubit. So we have these qubits so far. We got the auth, moderation, and post. Let's now add in the subscription qubit. And beneath that, we also have the offerings qubit as well. Cool, and then if I come down here to the block consumer, you can see in the listener, right? We are listening for an auth error. Now I want to also listen for authentication. So if the state is authenticated, so like someone just logged in, we want to check this person's pro status, right? And that's what we got the subscription qubit for. And let's print it to the console just so we know as well. So if I open up my debug console and I just refresh this, you can see like these things that it's printing out helps us know what's actually happening in the different states of the app. And it looks like we have an error here. So error checking pro status. It's missing the plug-in exception and for that particular package. Oh, yeah. So since we included a new package, let's kill the app and rebuild it. And we have this error from the CocoaPods. So it's got the updating dependency problem. So this is a common problem when you add a new package on iOS. And I think I showed you guys how to fix this previously in the course. So we're going to do the same thing here. So what we need to do is we need to change the directory and go to the iOS. And we need to remove the pod file. Let's pod deintegrate. So what this does is it just deletes the entire pod file. And then I'm just going to pod install repo update so that we can just get everything from scratch. This way we can guarantee that we have all the updated packages. And once that's done, just say flutter clean. And finally, flutter pub get. Hopefully we have no issues and everything is looking good. All right, so let's try to build our app now. And great. So we're checking the pro status and we have a new error now. It's saying purchases have not been configured. Oh, yes, let's actually do that. So remember, we had an API key that we actually meant to give it. So in our data, let's create a new file called revenue_cat constants. And this is for the API key. And now this is going to be unique for every individual person, right? This Apple API key for revenue_cat. If you come back to your revenue_cat and you see the API keys, this one here that you have, you're going to need to copy this one in. And then in the main function, we need to configure the revenue_cat just at the very beginning. So let's await it, go to the revenue_cat service and configure it with our API key. Beautiful. So I'm going to kill the app and just rebuild it. And it's rebuilding and it's built successfully. Beautiful. And you can see it says revenue_cat configured successfully. We're trying to do our authentication and we're checking the pro status. And then it's saying pro user is false, which is what we want. Everything is looking good so far. Now I want to come to my home page and I want to show you how we can try to monetize our app. Right now, there's different strategies we could use. And so for example, right, like a very key functionality of this current app is just making a new post. And so let's try to restrict that particular function to only pro users. And so what I'm going to do is let's try to make it so that the user wants to add a new post. We are going to check the pro status. And so only pros can make a post. Let's call this handle add post. And let's firstly get the current subscription state from the qubit. Right, if the subscriptions are loaded and the person happens to be a pro, then we can proceed to add post. Else, the user is not a pro, then what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the subscription dialog to make them consider subscribing. So let's create this dialog now. So let's say pro subscription required. Only pro users can post and comment. Please subscribe. And then in the actions, we're going to have a cancel button. As well as a subscribe button. Now, when I subscribe, what I want to do is just pop the current dialog, of course, but then let's also navigate to the offerings page, which we haven't created yet. So let's create that now. So let's just start with a simple app bar and come back to our home page and let's import this new offerings page that we created. And let's see how this goes. And so with this new handle add post method, let's replace that here for the icon button. And so if I click on this plus button, you can see in our debug console, it says we are not a pro user. So if I hit the plus button, you can see, yeah, it shows this prompt saying that we need a pro subscription. Sweet. And if I click subscribe, then it takes us to the offerings page. Beautiful. Let's do the same thing for when we add a comment. So that's in our post page. I'm going to actually come back to the home page and grab this. So the two methods that we just created. and put it in the post page, and let's just change it to be comments. Nice. And then this new add comment, let's replace it into this button. And then if I save this and I try to add a new comment here, you can see we are not pro, so pro subscription required. And then it'll prompt the user to subscribe. Cool, so now that we're on this offerings page, let's start to decorate this up. So firstly, we need to have the URLs for the privacy policy and the Apple's end user license agreement. So it's required for us to have these links on this page. And so let's bring in the links later on when we're done coding it up. And let's also have a helper method to launch the URL so that the user can open up like a web page. So to do this, let's open up our terminal and add in this package, Flutter Pub Add URL Launcher. This is just a very popular package to use. And you can see if I say launch URL, yep, there's our package. And for the launch mode, let's say external applications. So it'll just open up the Safari browser, for example. And then in our build method, let's grab our subscription qubit. As well as our offerings qubit. And we're going to load the offerings as soon as the page is built. And just to decorate this up as well, let's just grab the color scheme from our theme. And we can now build out the UI. So in the body, I'm going to use a block builder with our offerings qubits and the offering states. And so we have these different states. So starting with the loading, if we're loading, let's just return a circular progress indicator. If it's an error, let's display what the error message is. And when it's loaded, then we can now get the available packages. Now, if the packages is empty, then let's just say that there are no offerings available. And if we do have some packages available, then we're going to return it in a list. Cool, so let's get each individual package. And let's also get the billing period, or maybe the subscription duration. So if you go to the package and the identifier, let's see if it contains the keyword year to see if it's a year or month subscription. So if I come back to my revenue cat and I go to my packages, you can see these are the two packages, right? So I'm just checking when the identifier, I believe this is the one. So we're just checking if it's a year or a month. And then let's just return it in a card UI. And so in a column at the top, we can have the package title. And then below that, let's have the package price. And then below that, we can have the package duration. Cool. And at the end of this, we can actually have a default fallback. So just by default, I'm just going to have a loading circle. And if I save this, yeah, you can see that it showed up with our two packages. Now the price I think is good. Now I don't know why it says for the duration, it says month for both, right? Like let's actually include the duration in the price. Let's say price, and then dash the duration. So everything's working fine, except for the fact that for the month, it's month, but for the yearly, it's also showing month. So that means something is going wrong with this package identifier. Now, this is where it's helpful to just kind of debug to see what the problem is. I'm actually just going to print this identifier and let's see what it's actually saying. So if I refresh this and I go to subscribe and I go to the offerings page, there it is. You can see what is printing out, this monthly and annual. So it's actually meant to say annual, not year. And if I save this, yeah, beautiful. So it's now showing the correct duration. So if I come back to my revenue cat, it looks like this is the identifier that we're checking for. So, yep, let's say that. And then now we can just decorate it. This is just the fun part. So I'm going to go ahead and style it to my liking. You can obviously decorate this however you want, but I'm just going to style this up and add some padding and some margins. Cool, and then beneath this, we need to have a button to subscribe. So let's use like a green color and say subscribe now. And for the text, let's actually make it white. And bold. Sweet, and then if I press on this, then let the offerings qubit handle this part. Cool, so to make our code nice and organized, let's actually do that at the top here. We're going to create a helper method to handle the purchase. So let's grab our qubits again. And initiate the purchase using our offerings qubit. We can purchase the package. And then after successful purchase, let's refresh the subscription status. And let's wait until the subscription state shows that the user is pro, and then we can close the page. So if you go to your qubit, we can listen to the stream. And the first time that the sub state is loaded, and the person is a pro, then I just want to pop this screen. Beautiful. So this handle purchase method, let's come down here and pass it on to this subscribe button. And this is looking really good. Looks like we didn't really use this one, so we can get rid of this. And let's refresh the page. So I'm going to try to subscribe. And beautiful, it's telling us to sign in with our Apple ID. Cool, now if I cancel, it looks like it's just stuck on the loading screen. And I thought I handled the loading part in our offerings qubit. Let's have a look at the purchase package method. Yeah, so this little bit of code, the user canceling the purchase flow. Let's just copy this, and actually we should put it also here under the successful purchase if statement. Yep, so if it's unsuccessful and the user just kind of cancels the flow. So let's just try this again. I'm going to refresh the page, try to subscribe and cancel. Then yes, we just go back to the previously loaded packages. Everything is looking so good. Okay, so let's just fine tune this and make it look a little nicer. And I'm going to try to space this out appropriately. And that's looking pretty good. Now, on this subscription page, it's a requirement, like I mentioned before, to show this privacy policy URL. So we already created that before. So I'm going to paste our privacy policy here. And we also need to have this EULA URL, so the end user license agreement. For this, we need to include the Apple's EULA. So if I just open up this link here, it's the standard license agreement just provided by Apple. And this is just for the monetization part of your app. So we have to include this because we are actually trying to make money. So we can use Apple's standard agreement. And in the scaffold, in the bottom navigation bar, let's create a row for these two links. So we got the privacy policy and we got the Apple end user license agreement. Sweet, so there it is. Now let's space it evenly. And actually, let's wrap it in a safe area widget as well, just to avoid that bottom section. And if I click on this, hopefully I can open up a link, which I can't right now because we only recently added that package. So remember, every time we add a new package, it's always a good idea to just kill the app and rebuild it. And there it is. So if I go to my offerings page, let's click privacy policy and yay, we can open up this web browser. And that's it. That's all the requirements that we need to do for the monetization. So obviously, depending on you and your app, you would have a different monetization strategy. So in this one, I just made it so that we're restricting the main functionality of the app. But depending on your app's needs and your app's goals, you can adjust it to your specific situation. But remember, all of this stuff we can change in the future updates. So just to make sure that the app is approved and the monetization part, like all the revenue cat stuff, is all good, I'm going to say Flutter run, and I'm just going to test this on my physical device just to make sure everything is kind of working fine. And just coming back to the App Store Connect, if you go to the users and access section and you go to the sandbox, you can actually create a test account. So you can go ahead and create a new tester just to see if your monetization is working correctly and that kind of subscription flow is all fine. So I'm just going to let you know that you can do this testing. And while I was testing this on my device, one thing I found was if you actually go to the top here and you can toggle the software keyboard, you might see this little overflow problem. Now, in the release version, all of this will be taken care of, but just so that it looks nice in our debug version as well, I'm going to go to the page for this. So in the auth, you got the login page. And this is just a giant column. So one trick you can do is wrap it in a single child scroll view, which essentially just makes your column scrollable. And so now when you try to use that software keyboard, you're not going to have an overflow problem. So let's do the same thing for our register page. But like I said, I'm only doing this just to make sure it's like really perfect. But when your app's in the App Store, it'll use the release version, which kind of handles all this anyway. So I just want to make it look good for our debug version too. Beautiful. Now let's build this again and submit it to the App Store Connect. Now, since we have our first version already on the App Store, when you want to upload the next version, if you go to the pubspec.yaml, you can see the version here. So I'm just going to increment that last digit by 1 and save it. And then let's say Flutter build iOS. Cool, that's built. Then let's open up Xcode. Let's go to Product, Archive, And let's wait for this to rebuild. There it is. You can see that 1.0.1. And let's distribute it to App Store Connect. Cool, now that's done. Again, let's wait for an email from Apple, which should take a few minutes, letting us know that the build has done processing. And coming back to App Store Connect, I want you to click the plus button to have a new version. So let's say 1.0.1. Cool, and then you'll have this little section here saying what's new in this version. I'm going to say pro users are able to post and comment. And then we've got the build, so let's just save what we have so far. And once your build is done processing and you got that email, let's refresh the page and we can add this build. And save. Beautiful. Now, if I go to my subscriptions and you go to each subscription here, I also want to show you how you can change the price, right? So if you click on the starting price here, you can see I set it to be $2.99 just at the very beginning, but just to show you how to change it, you can click this edit. And I'm going to say recalculate it and we can pick a new price. So let's say 99 cents. And same thing for the yearly. If you want to change the price, this is how you do it. You can say edit price. Now, one extra thing I forgot to do in this subscription is add the localization. So this is just the names. So I'm going to say pro subscription monthly. The description is unlock premium features. And at the very bottom, you can see here it says we've got to include a screenshot. So this is just for the review process. So what you want to do is just go to your app in the offerings page and just screenshot that just to upload to this section here so that the Apple people know what's going on. Hit save. And do the same thing for the yearly. Just add the localization. And let's add the exact same screenshot. You can see now it says ready to submit. And then on the main page, our build. You got this section here for the in-app purchases and subscriptions. So now we can select it. So those are the two that we created. And everything's looking good. So let's save it and let's add it for review. And click submit to app review. Cool. So now let's just wait for the Apple people to review our app. Okay, so it came back rejected because of what reason? Let's have a look. It says your app uses auto-renewable subscriptions, but it doesn't clearly describe what the user will receive. I see. So again, if you're not sure what they're saying with your review, you can always post a message and ask them questions. And I know what the problem is. So yeah, we got this subscriptions there with the price and everything, but we should also add in a bit of text just describing to the user what this is going to do, right? If you're a pro user. Let's come back to our app and let's just include a new build. In our offerings page, where we are creating the UI, we got the loaded packages and we're putting it in a list. And so let's wrap this list in a column and just make it expanded to fill up the entire space. And just above it, I'm just going to bring in a little bit of text to describe what the Pro subscription will bring you. Right, so yeah, there's that bit of text in there. So I'm going to say something like, Pro users unlock posting and commenting capabilities. And let's just style this up. And let's center it and just space this out a bit. And so, yep, this little bit of text is what they want, just us describing what the user is going to get. And from my experience, it's also a good idea to state that the subscriptions will auto renew unless cancelled in the App Store account settings. Cool. And so, yep, this little bit of text is the last thing we need to do. So save it and let's finally do the Flutter build iOS. And that's done. Let's open up Xcode. Go to product, archive, and let's wait for this to build again. Beautiful, and distribute it to the App Store Connect. Sweet, so while that's building and we wait for the email from Apple to say the build is done processing, coming back to our app on this offerings page, let's grab the new screenshot and come back to our App Store Connect. And I'm actually going to reply to this person and send a message. I'm going to say, thank you for your help. I have fixed the requested issues on the offerings page, or let's say on the subscriptions page. It outlines at the top with text about what Pro users will get. And let's just say what we wrote. Pro users unlock posting and commenting capabilities. And let's also say, I also included a text about auto renew to let the user know. Subscriptions will auto renew unless cancelled in the App Store account settings. And at the end, I'm just going to say, I believe this is the final fix and everything should be good now. Thank you for your guidance and help. And just to be sure, I'm going to attach an image to let them know what I'm talking about. And just remember, these are real people, so treat them with respect and they're going to help you back as well. Sweet. So let's edit and come back to our build here and update our new build. Save it. And also in our subscriptions, let's update the screenshots at the very bottom. Right, this screenshot here. And same thing for the yearly. And everything is looking good. So now let's finally add for review. And resubmit to app review. Cool, so now it's waiting for the review. And for me, it was a quick turnaround. It took like 1 day. And it says the review of your submission is complete. So all of our monetization as well has been approved. Sweet, so now our app is ready for distribution. And it actually outlines here, the following in-app purchases have been approved for the App Store. Very nice. And that's it.